when we come in front of you every year. This is a graphic of our utility infrastructure that we recently completed. It shows how much infrastructure we have underground and above ground. We have 4 water towers above ground. We have 136 miles of stormwater pipes, nearly 200 miles of sanitary sewer lines, over 200 miles of drinking water, 4 treatment plants, almost 7,000 catch basins and stormwater structures. So it's just an interesting graphic just to see how much infrastructure we have in the ground from a utility standpoint. Since I've been standing in front of you since 2012 through 2018, I wanted to give a little summary of what we've done as part of this program and that importance. So on the roadway side, we've completed almost 40 miles of street reconstruction, and we have 204 miles in town, so almost 20% of the network's been replaced. Gate valves, we're over 20%. There's 2,000 gate valves on our water main system. Fire hydrants, we've replaced 18% of the fire hydrants. Sanitary sewer, we've done about 10%. And water main, we're at around 5% of replacement on that infrastructure in the last 6 years. This is a pavement condition index chart for the last, since 2011. We've talked with the council on this on many occasions, but you can see we bottomed out 2012, 2013 at a PCI of 51, and it's a ranking from 0 to 100. 100 is a brand new street, and 0 is basically a gravel street. So we can say we bottomed out at 51 6 years ago, and we've been slowly improving that quality of our street infrastructure. And you can see that deflection point in 2016 where we got a little more budget for maintenance operations. So you can see where we're headed today on the green line, where we would have been on the red line if we hadn't increased that maintenance budget. This shows over since 2008, we've reduced the amount of impervious surface on our roads by 5.5 acres. So if we recall all the discussions on stormwater management, this is a direct benefit to narrow the streets. Not only have we reduced it by 5.5 acres, we've treated 240 acres with new treatment structures through these neighborhood projects. So tonight we'll talk about these 4 neighborhoods. We'll start in the southwest area with Indian Trails B and C. There's 93 properties. Move to Indian Hills C, which is 16. Chowan Park A and B, which is just over 300 properties on the eastern part of town. And then on the north central, we'll do Todd Park, and there's 7 properties associated with that. So these are the neighborhoods we're going to talk about tonight. If the council approves them tonight at the public hearing, we would look at construction in 19 with a final assessment hearing in the fall of 2020. So we'll go through some more of those details with each project. But that's just a very general schedule. The assessment policy, just for review, it's the properties that are benefiting from the public improvements can be assessed to help pay for those improvements. It's a state statute. Edina's policy states that assessments cover 100% of the roadway costs. Roadway includes the roadway itself, driveway removals and replacements, subgrade materials, asphalt, pavements, and restoration, including retaining walls, landscaping, seeding, and then indirect costs for engineering, finance, soil investigations, mailing, anything to do with those the roadway reconstruction costs. Within the policy, it actually states verbatim on this first sentence that assessable costs include all project costs not allocated to other funding sources. So the other funding sources we have available are utilities, sanitary sewer, water main, storm sewer funds. The PACS fund is a pedestrian and cyclist safety fund. That's a franchise fees we use for paying for sidewalks and bike facilities. And then the municipal state aid system is if it's a municipal state aid route, which we don't have any tonight, but 58th Street, 60th Street near the Chowan neighborhood would be an example of that. So we have concerns if we start picking out certain items based on concerns with an assessment amount, because it hasn't been considered in the past. So we want to make sure we're fair to the past projects and residents that were assessed, but also consider the future projects. There may be a difference of opinion on the condition of an element, and that'd be a different discussion versus actually the assessment amount. And you're going to see some that assessments vary by neighborhood based on various things that I'll show on the next slide. So that might be a potential discussion if our assessment policy is appropriate at this time. And we can account, maybe there's ways we can account for those variations in projects if we so choose to do that review of the policy in 2019 or in the near future. What are some of those variables? So within many neighborhoods, the main one has been subcuts. So what's the subsoils underneath the street today? And what do we have to do to make that support a new street? So just to give you some dollar value numbers, Birchcrest and Gulf Terrace were projects we had done in the past. 5 years. They were different years, different areas. And within that assessment amount, there was $2,800 to $3,800 per residential equivalent unit. And that's how we do our assessments, as a residential equivalent unit. It's a single-family home, and we'll talk more about that when we get into it. But those subcuts accounted for 22 to 32% of that assessment, whereas there are other project areas where we didn't have any subcuts. It was sandy soils, could support the street. So the variations are quite considerable with subcuts. Lighting is another example. Bramer Hills, 2010, we added $1,000 in there, or 15% of the assessment for lighting. Valley View Road, 2015, for walls, railings, and lightings, that accounted for 35% of the assessment. That was $2,600. And retaining walls, we're going to have discussions about retaining walls this evening. We got some new information on the benefit test that I'll share with you in a little bit. But those occur on some scale on almost every project, and those have been assessed in the past. So I just want to make sure we're aware of that. Like I mentioned, per the policy, once the project's over, 1 year after construction is when we have that final assessment hearing. So the projects tonight would be considered in the fall of 2020. And these are the options to pay those back. You can pay back that entire amount before it's sent to Hennepin County and put on your tax statement to avoid future interest charges. You could pay 25% and the balance rolls over to your property tax statement over 15 years. You can roll that entire amount over 15 years, and then if you meet certain income requirements and age, there might be an option to defer the assessment. So per that statute, we've been getting a lot of questions about the benefit question, because by the statute, it has to provide a benefit, a market value benefit. So in the mid-2000s, there was a group that did a study, an appraisal, a consulting group did a study on our policy, and at the time they saw benefit by 3 different density neighborhoods. We felt it was time to update that study. So we did that in 2018, and the Day Group completed that study. You received that study at the last council meeting, and it looked at a general review of our policy, considering 3 different density neighborhoods: Morningside, Melody Lake, and then Rolling Green. 2 of those neighborhoods I would consider similar to some neighborhoods we're considering tonight. And the range for the higher density neighborhoods, like Morningside or Chowan, the range was $10,000 to $15,000. The benefit that their opinion was that they would be seen by a street reconstruction project. The middle density neighborhood, which I would correlate to the Indian Trails, Indian Hills area, correlated, in their opinion, about $15,000 to $20,000 benefit. This was a big picture review. So we hired Nagel Appraising, which does general benefit letters, and that's what you found on the dais tonight. There's reports for every neighborhood up there. They looked at it by project, exactly what we're doing as proposed in our engineering reports. They developed these ranges, and all the ranges that they developed are almost exactly, our assessments that we're proposing tonight fall within the ranges that they said by project. So we wanted to be able to answer that benefit question a little bit better. The exception to that is the retaining walls in the Indian Trails project. We found that it can't be supported. Those walls are not going to be supported from this market value benefit test. So our recommendation, we're going to pull those walls out and have a discussion about the walls when we get to that project. But I wanted to make you aware of the additional reports that are on the dais. The city clerk has a copy of those, and then we'll get it into the council meeting minutes for future reference for anybody. So with that, unless there's any question on that material, if not, I'll get into the first neighborhood.
Chad, can I just ask, with respect to these, not even sure what to call it, the 4 documents on the dais tonight?
Yep.
What they're not appraisals, but what are they? Kind of a market study or a?
Yep, they're a general benefit letter based on 2 appraisers' opinions, because they do appraisals all the time on select properties, and understanding exactly what we propose from a street reconstruction standpoint. And what's the correlation when they did a drive-through of this existing infrastructure comparing to what we want to do? What's the range of benefits, in their opinion, they would see by neighborhood?
Sure.
And they did it by neighborhood on the letter. So it's.
And is this something that we've done in the past, or is this something new?
We have not. I learned that they do this for other agencies, and I felt it was really appropriate because we get so many questions on this.
Right.
Can we take it from this general view down one more step to kind of neighborhood-wide?
Earlier in the process to
Early in
kind of
the
say,
process, help the question, so maybe we don't have all these questions
Sure.
at the hearings. I mean, ultimately, you could take that one step and appraise every property, but that
Right,
would be
right.
very expensive.
But
So
this is a new
this is
effort
new
on this
information.
set of projects.
Exactly that. We haven't done before as part of this process.
All right, thank you.
So I'll get started. The first one tonight is Indian Trails B and C, BA 452. And we're at the public hearing this evening. So like we mentioned, this is in the southwest part of town. There's 93 properties. It's about a mile of streets for reconstruction, 9 fire hydrants, 18 sanitary manholes. It includes Sally Lane, Paiute Drive, Circle, and Pass, Comanche Court, Bellow Drive, Shawnee Circle, and Overholt Pass. So I'll go through each of the utility systems, give you the existing conditions, and then tell you what we're going to propose right away, and then we'll get into the street and walls towards the end with assessments followed. So on the water side, we have mostly ductile and copper pipes. There's a couple segments that are small copper pipes in the 1.5, 1.25 to 2 inch supply water to 3 to 4 to almost 5 properties. So one of those is Overholt Pass. The other one is Paiute Circle. So there's relatively few breaks. It's the original fire hydrants, and the gate valves are nearing the end of their useful life. We're proposing to replace all those gate valves so we can better control the system. Let's get the fire hydrants up to our city standard with the stores connection so our fire department can have quick and easy access to them. We replace portions of the water main and associated water services. And then we want to verify that there's appropriate hydrant spacing. And if we need, we'll add additional hydrants to meet the public safety standards of our fire department. We also are going to extend water main along Overholt Pass, where there's only a 2-inch copper line today, and put a hydrant at the end of Overholt Pass to provide fire protection there. And then also on Shawnee Circle, that's a copper line again, so we extend that water main, 6-inch water main with a fire hydrant on the end of that cul-de-sac to bring it up to the state standards. On the sanitary sewer, so it's clay reinforced concrete or ductile iron pipes. They're in fair condition. That's a picture on the right. You can see some cracking of that clay pipe. Clay pipe comes in short sections, 3-foot sections, and there's opportunities for inflow and infiltration occurring in the system. So clean water can get into the system, which we don't want. And then we got to pay Met Council fees for how much waste is metered out at the border of Edina. So it's really localized sanitary sewer defects. We'll look for sags, stuff like that, major cracks that we have to do with open cut, but otherwise we're proposing to do a cured in place pipe liner. So we're building a pipe within a pipe, and we can do that from the manhole openings with no disturbance to the residents. They're going to be asked to limit their water use when this operation is being done, but it's typically a 1-day operation. We re-establish those services, and we've just installed a 100-year product within the old pipes. Along with that, typically where a lot of the clean water comes in on our manholes is the top 2 to 4 feet. So we want to replace all the castings of our manholes and all the rings. That's where we get additional potential for clean water. So we really want to tighten up that sanitary sewer system to only have wastewater in it. On the storm sewer system, most of the streets have curb and gutter. There are some storm sewer pipes. They're corrugated metal or reinforced concrete pipes. And there are some localized surface draining issues, and those are verified by the residents doing our questionnaires. We also have a big flood shape that's shown in our Comprehensive Water Resource Management Plan. So the majority of this shape is right along the south branch of the 9 Mile Creek. And it's behind the homes on the west side of Sally Lane. That spills over into the intersection of Sally and Paiute Pass, and even a little bit of the backyards in this area and a little bit in this area. So we know there's an issue here. With the creek being the main driver, we don't quite understand exactly how, if we can solve the entire issue, but we're going to try to address it. Some of the homes are within the flood shape. And in 2015, we extended a storm sewer, 36-inch storm from Valley View Road up to this intersection to prepare for making improvements to the storm sewer system. At the time of that improvement, this neighborhood wasn't on the calendar for reconstruction, so it got put in the year after. Otherwise, we would have probably held off of doing any of this stormwater work. So on the storm sewer side, curb and gutter is paid out of the storm sewer utility fund. So we're going to do, there's no curb and gutter on Shawnee Circle, Overholt Pass. We're proposing new concrete curb and gutter there. And the concrete curb on Bellow Drive is beyond the amount that we want to salvage. So it's over 60%, and it's usually cheaper just to replace it all than to try to spot repair. So full replacement on those 3 streets. The remainder of the streets would be spot replacement. We think a lot of it's in good shape, and we just want to do spot repairs until the next cycle. And again, how much curb we replace is directly related to our stormwater sewer fund and the rates that we've talked about the last few weeks during the rate study conversations and stuff like that. So it's really, let's replace the infrastructure when it's due. And then the Comanche Court cul-de-sac, there's some drainage issues around the outside of it. It's really a very large cul-de-sac. There'll be some adjustments to that cul-de-sac to address some of the drainage issues and also to shrink it down a little bit for impervious, and we'll work with the neighbors that live in that area. Some other things is we do to address some of these existing drainage issues. Sometimes it's just a grade change or a slope change in the roadway. We'll make those changes as we can. And then we install sump drain pipe where people can attach their sump pumps and discharges from their roof if they choose to. So we'll look, where feasible, install the sump drain pipe network. That's the smaller picture on the bottom center. In regards to that big flood shape, Bar Engineering's in the middle of their study. They should have recommendations to us in the next couple weeks. We would look at the recommendations, figure out what we can do to tie into either that 36-inch pipe or if there's something on Valley View that maybe needs to be addressed. And then we'll start to communicate with the residents out here, figure out a plan, because I think a lot of these are going to require some easements that we don't have. So if the residents don't want to participate in improvements, then we'll have a conversation and we'll keep the council up to speed and in those conversations. But in many cases, as we're seeing around town, we need buy-in by the residents in order to do some of these stormwater improvements, because we got to either get to the backyards or get easements along sign yards. So we're not quite there yet from a true proposal on what we're doing on the stormwater yet. The existing road conditions. So the streets were originally constructed in the 1960s, except for Bellow Drive. That was 1992, and that one's in pretty bad shape. Street widths vary between 25 feet and 30 feet wide, and the soils are primarily silty sand base material. And you can see a picture on the right-hand side here of some pavement failures around a manhole. Those are some of the issues that we want to address. The city of Edina, we showed that graphic on the PCI, so the pavement condition index is a rank of 0 is a gravel road, 100 is brand new. Our city average has been increasing over the last 6 years. We're at 72 right now. Many agencies have a goal number, we don't. But 72 is definitely getting up from the fair to good number. Indian Trails B and C, it's at 35, and the reason for that being higher, it would be under 20 if it wasn't for that patch on Sally Lane that we completed as part of that stormwater improvement that we did 3 years ago. So that's why that number is a little bit higher than you would typically see with a project. What we'd like to do with a project is recycle the existing pavement and reuse it. An interesting thing with all of our neighborhoods tonight is that the bituminous is on non-granular. It's not granular material underneath the bituminous. Typically when you want to recycle, if it's 2 inches of bituminous, you want 2 inches of granular base underneath and mix a nice product to reuse as the base material in the street. All of these projects don't have any granular material underneath them. So we're going to have to import a lot of new material. It might be by chance that all of our soil borings just happen to find all those spots without granular material. So if we open it up and find it, we can still do that later, and that would actually reduce the assessments forward. But thus far, we're assuming worst case scenario in the assessments we're presenting tonight. There are some subgrade corrections that will be needed. We also made some assumptions there with our assessments, and then we're proposing to construct a whole new road section. What guides our road section is the Living Streets Plan. So typically most of our streets are 30 feet wide. We want to go down to 27 feet wide, and that goes to that discussion about the impervious areas, trying to limit that, and we've done 5.5 acres. Stormwater management's a benefit of that. Traffic calming, to have a narrow street, provide some traffic calming. Reduce life cycle costs, so we maintain the streets afterwards, and it's cheaper for us to maintain a narrower street. Less materials, less operations on a narrower street. There are some streets that are even narrow that, and that's just the nature of how they're built today. Shoshani Circle, we're proposing 24 feet wide with one-sided parking, and Overholt Pass today is even narrower, and we're proposing a 21-foot wide street there with one-sided parking. And that would be with or without wall construction, and we'll get to the wall discussion here in a little bit. So the retaining walls. These are the existing natural stone retaining walls. This is a picture of the one on Shawnee Circle. There's a similar one on Overholt Pass. They were originally constructed between 1960 and 1971. They range in height up to 8 feet. Most are over 4 feet, and they're starting to see erosion and bulging. There's probably not drainage systems behind these walls like there should be if you built it today. So we got material coming out of those joints. They're starting to bulge, and there's concern with how long they're going to last. So we hired a structural engineer. Gale Tech does a lot of our wall designs in town. It was their opinion, our opinion, that those walls are nearing the end of their useful life and that they should be reconstructed. So we looked at 4 options when we were talking about reconstructing them. 2 options are putting in these big block walls, either in place of the existing walls or in front of the current wall, or using natural stone walls and pouring basically the big block behind it with porous concrete. And we'll show you a little schematic of that. We had multiple meetings with residents that live on these 2 streets, and they were really concerned about the trees and the landscaping and really minimizing those impacts. Minimizing those impacts if the council goes, if we were we were recommending a removal of those walls. We're not going to recommend that with these projects anymore. But in either case, it was aesthetics, trees, and landscaping were really the concerns of the residents. So if we were going to replace these walls, how would we do it? And we were proposing to put in the natural stone wall 2 to 3 feet in front of the existing, so we wouldn't disturb the trees and the landscaping. We'd build this 2 to 3 feet high, pour in porous concrete. So then any water that comes behind there can drain out the drains that we put in. You build another 2 feet up, pour it again. So you're basically building a big block wall in front of the natural stone wall, but you're using a natural stone. So the look would be similar. You would tie in those the existing stone wall with this new one, and it would drain properly, and you wouldn't have the concerns that we have now.
But it adds 4 feet.
Yep, but it goes with the street width that we're proposing. So Shawnee was at 24, Overholt was 21. So I can show you that a little later. With all of our projects within the right-of-way, we have things we have to work around, things we work with residents, landscaping features, mailboxes, irrigation system, pet fences. If there's lots of landscaping and plants, we'll ask that they start to move those in advance, and we would notify those residents of when the construction's coming in 2019. With some of these other structures, we got to have conversations about how to replace them. We typically, mailboxes such as the one on the right, typically shouldn't be put in the right-of-way, but we replace them after projects anyway. Pet fences and irrigation systems are another discussion that we get into, and we if they're damaged, we'll fix them. So we fix the irrigation systems, we fix the pet fences. So the estimated cost, you can see on the special assessments, there's 2 items. I'm making a recommendation tonight that we pull those retaining walls out of the assessments based on that study that you have on your dais, that we can't justify the benefit of these walls in their entirety to the neighborhood. So on the roadway side, we're proposing $1.09 million for roadway. Under the other utility funds, you can see sanitary, water, and storm sewer costs there. So the utility costs are about $1.3 million. Those would be funded out of the city utility funds. The total project cost would be about $2.3 million when you subtract those retaining walls.
And Mr. Milner, when you say removing those walls from the project, I believe it means you're going to tear down the wall and then not replace it. It does not mean you're going to leave the wall in its end of useful life state, right?
We will actually leave them in place, fix them as needed until we can develop some kind of plan, because these aren't the only walls we have in town. So how do we fund replacement of the walls? So majority of these walls we're pretty comfortable with. There's maybe some portions that are in worse conditions, but at this point I don't think it's an eminent safety concern. So we anticipate just leaving the walls as is, leaving enough space, like you just mentioned, that 3 to 4 feet. So leave enough space there so if we do figure out how to fund it in the future, we can come back, build them, and not have to worry about wrecking the street or the curb or the road. So that's my recommendation. So we talked about special assessments, the benefiting properties, covers 100% of the roadway costs. We talked about the roadway, the driver removal, subgrade materials, retaining walls when it's been for road purposes. We have assessed that in the past. Asphalt pavement restoration, again, with retaining walls for landscaping. If we've been in those, we have assessed those in the past. and seeding, and then those indirect costs that we've mentioned earlier, engineering, finance, soil investigations, mailings. This neighborhood has 93 properties, or 88.01 residential equivalent units. So a residential equivalent unit is a single-family home. So if you're within the project area, all the blue ones, that's one REU. If you're on a corner, you may have a 0.5 or a half REU, because when we did the adjacent street, if it's Valley View Road or Gleason, you would get assessed the other half when that project was up for reconstruction. So this is the map of the 1.0s, and the halves. There's a few properties along Valley View Road that are purple. Those are 0.67 REUs, and that's based on, because we had a different assessment policy when that project was approved in 2015. We adjusted the corner lot assessment method to half and half because we found it wasn't fair to do 0.67 or 1/3, 2/3, and which projects came first. So we did that in 2016 with the council, made it half and half, and really made it fair between the neighborhoods. So this was my original slide where it would show the roadway and the retaining walls. I want to clearly show that we are not proposing the retaining wall assessment at this time. We're proposing an assessment, preliminary assessment of $12,475 per REU. And that covers just the street reconstruction portion and not the walls on Shawnee and Overholt. I think we covered this a little bit, but those are the assessable costs, all costs not allocated to underfunding sources. So based on those appraisal letters, there is an option to assess only Shawnee and Overholt properties. There's 9 or 10 properties. Based on that letter, we could assess those properties up to $18,000. That's the benefit that those appraisers see from a road standpoint for those specific properties. We were proposing to assess the whole project for those walls. They confirmed that that was not a good way to do it because the people didn't benefit in another area. People right here do benefit from it, and they benefit up to $18,000. I'm not recommending that tonight, but it's something we can discuss and have a conversation if we should approve an $18,000 just for Shawnee and Overholt. If we do that, it would generate about $50,000 for those walls that we could use for maintenance or repairs or whatever, and that still is only 20% of the overall cost. So again, we don't have a dedicated funding source for walls of this scale in town. So again, that could be a potential discussion on the assessment policy going forward on how do we account for these variations with projects. Just for some examples, President C is coming up. Here's another major wall, 8 feet tall, 260 feet. If it's needs some improvements, how do we do that in the future? We had some on 70th Street where we've already made repairs and assessed residents for on 70th Street in 2011. In Valley View Road, this is across the street from the sidewalk project that we're going to do, phase 2, major walls. We got another 10 slides of major walls in town. I think it's an issue we should start to talk about on how we're going to fund these. Eventually they're going to need work. Do we just repair them or do we do full-scale remove and replacements to make them structurally sound? So I think that's a conversation on how we do that in the future for another day, unless there's a conversation about that potential $18,000 assessment.
Member Staunton may have a question for you.
Yeah, just to these other retaining walls, did you say we've assessed in the past for the maintenance? Or the pictures you were showing look like, kind of like the ones that are in this project, or were in this project?
Yep.
Did we repair them or maintain them, or did we do what you were originally proposing to do here?
We did variations of, 2 of them were future ones. One of them was what we did. So White Oaks, we built a whole wall along White Oaks, new wall.
Was there one there previously
One there before,
and we replaced it?
and it was tipping over, then it was like this. We've never had them as this big, this tall, this long.
Yeah.
It just happened that we've never had it up to this
And it wraps
point.
around, and
And
some
it
of
wraps
the neighbors,
around.
it
It's-
wraps into their...
Usually it's 20,000,
Yeah,
40,
right.
easily kind of within a project scope of restoration items. This one's 20% of the
Yeah.
cost. I mean, it's such a large scale. So that's why we started looking around town. What other ones we have?
So as that goes, are all of these retaining walls we see near our rights of way in the rights of way, or are they in the private property, or some of both, or how does that work?
Some of both. I mean, I think the pictures we showed you were there for transportation benefit to get the road in.
So we take the approach that it's our responsibility, right?
Yes.
Because it's basically holding up the earth from coming onto the sidewalk or the street.
There's some newer developments where we have record that they put the walls in because they wanted to put a lot in. And
Got
then
it.
if we have records, then we can say, that's not our wall, that's the owner's wall.
Because they did it to create
did it
some
to
benefit
create a
for
space to
themselves.
build a house.
Right.
Like this example in Valley View, this is an old street. I bet we don't have any records of, was the street there before the house or was the house before the street?
So one of the issues that we need to just be thinking about is these retaining walls that are all over town, and what's both an effective and an equitable way for us to deal with those.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And land and stone walls, there's single blocks. A lot of the old ones don't have drainage systems behind them. When you start to build them to this scale, they probably shouldn't be used for this scale of a wall.
Right.
So, yep, we got concerns going forward.
All right, thank you.
Payment options, we talked about
So
this.
before we leave that topic, thinking about the walls just east of City Hall here, as you go down 50th,
Yep.
were those assessed? I mean, those were all replaced, I think, recently. Did we assess the country club, or did we absorb that expense on a city basis? What happened there? Those are some fairly expansive wall systems.
I don't
With-
recall on 50th Street,
Right,
right
with
here.
land and stone.
Yep, I don't recall those. Anything in Country Club was assessed as part of those. I know we had some walls in there, but they were not to this same scale. And we have other examples. It just never got to this scale before.
Okay. I'd be interested in what you find on 50th.
Yep, and maybe we can find some history while we're looking on our network. See if we can find anything quickly for you. Payment,
Thank you, go ahead.
so payment options, we talked about this already, but it would be assessed construction in 19 with a final assessment hearing in October of 2020. So people that would have the assessment have the option of paying that entire amount upon receiving the bill to avoid future interest charges. They could pay 25% of that balance and roll the rest over onto their property taxes over 15 years. They can roll that entire amount on the property taxes over 15 years, and then there's an option if they meet certain age and income requirements that there's an option to defer that assessment until the property is sold or some other event happens. Project schedules, we've been talking with all these neighborhoods since 2016. So we've had open houses 16 and 17. We had a neighborhood informational meeting in August of this year to discuss the assessment ranges and more specifics. There was an engineering, or the ETC reviewed our studies in October. You received these engineering reports last week at the city council meeting, and we're here tonight for the public hearing. And if the council approves one or all these projects this evening, we're anticipating a bid opening in the April of 2019, award the contract, begin construction in the spring, and it's going to be phased by areas, complete construction in 19, and then that final assessment hearing in 2020. So we believe the project is feasible, cost-effective, and necessary to improve the public infrastructure. We recommend approving resolution number 2018-131 and authorize staff to go forward with bidding documents and award. Within that resolution, there isn't a description about the preliminary assessments retaining in regards to those retaining walls. So we don't need to amend that resolution, but it just states going forward and that we accept the preliminary assessment. So I'd stand for any questions at this point from the council.
One question I'll ask that may be helpful to people is, we typically see a difference between the preliminary assessment number, which we have to make sure has sufficient cushion in it, and the final assessment number. And could you talk a little bit about
Yep.
that variability based on our historic knowledge, and why you set the preliminary numbers the way you do?
Sure. So when we met with them in August, we had a range of numbers because we don't know quite yet what's included. As we get closer and closer to that bid date, we have a better understanding of what's there. But even at this point in time, we still have contingency in those numbers. So we're hoping to have a good bidding environment. We want to get out for bids early, so we're one of the first communities out for bids. And we typically see numbers that are under the preliminary number. When we go back for the final assessment hearing, we've seen reductions in those assessments anywhere from 5% to 30%. Typically, it's in that 10 to 15% range. We're hoping that continues, but we really have a much better understanding after we open the bids when we see how that compares to our estimates. But we've been seeing reductions from this number. We usually want to be safe, not have to go back and say we need more. Let's give a safe number with a proper amount of contingency and then reduce that when we have those hearings.
The other thing I think that is part and parcel of this discussion is, in the past, during some economic periods of real strong activity, we've seen some bids that exceeded our preliminary estimates, and you've come back with some recommendations that we just hold off.
Correct.
It's not commonplace, but it's not, maybe the exception, certainly not the rule, but tell us a little bit about what happens when these bids come back in that are higher than the preliminary estimate.
Yep, we've had a handful of occasions where that has happened. So we'd either look at how we scoped out the project. Is there something that could be removed or value engineered better? Was it a timing standpoint? When we open bids later in the year, we typically are up against contractors that are starting to get full, and they're going to raise their prices. And we've seen that on occasion when we weren't able to get those bid documents out in a timely fashion, and we had to just come back to the council and say, this isn't going to work from an economic standpoint. Let's try to rebid this the following year. Let's get out early. And in most cases, it's worked out best. It's worked out really well to rebid it, and come back the following year. So we do that analysis with every bid opening that we have, if these go forward, compared to what we are talking about tonight, and then compare it to what the bids are, and we'll see how they align. And if we're comfortable that they're going to align, we'll ask you to award it to those contractors. If not, then we'll come back with more information to decide what we're going to do going forward.
Good, thank you. For council members, are there other questions for Director Milner at this point in time? Member Fisher.
Yeah, Director Milner, we've gotten some emails from folks, and I don't know that it's necessarily this area. It could be one of the other ones we'll be talking about tonight, about curb and gutter. And could you explain a little bit further why, in some cases, it's a complete replacement? In other cases, I mean, I know in some of the streets here, there is no curb and gutter, so there'll be a whole new program. But one of the comments, in one of the emails, you said it couldn't be here tonight, just wanted to pass along the concern that doesn't want that patchwork quilt. What's the experience with that? Why do we decide, I think you said earlier, it's at 40% or 60%. If you could just explain that one more time, that'd be great.
Sure. When we go into a neighborhood, we look at the pavement condition and then all the different utility systems. So the water main system, sanitary sewer system, and the storm sewer system. So we look at, with those utility systems, how much of replacement and rehab do we want to do in those systems? So if it's a neighborhood, this area isn't, but Chowan Park later tonight, it's a full water main, full water service. So by the time you do all that water main work, all the curbs basically destroyed. So if it's a big full utility project, most likely it's going to be full curb replacements. So if that's not the case, as this example is, then we look at, let's go look at the condition of the curb. We walk it with interns, we walk it with staff, and we determine how much has to come out because it's cracked or heaved, or there's a drainage issue. We look at how many hydrants, and we figure out how much has to come out. If it gets into that 40 to 60% range, then we start running numbers, and it usually makes sense when we get up to that 60% damaged or concerned, that it just is cheaper to put in a whole new curb than to try to patch it. So our opinion is, if it's in good shape, let's keep it. It's aesthetics, it's not structural, it's still going to perform what it's supposed to, and let's get it on the second infrastructure replacement. The next time we're there, for maybe then it's full water main and storm sewer, and replace it then. So we don't think it's worth all these extra costs. It would be a pretty big jump if we replaced all the curb in all of our projects. The stormwater rates that we talked about recently would be up quite a considerable amount more. So it comes on the condition of the existing infrastructure and what we're doing with the underground utilities within a neighborhood.
Just out of curiosity, when you have concrete that's brand new next to concrete that's been there a long time, how long does it take, if ever, where the two just sort of they blend pretty much?
It depends how sharp your eye is, I think, but it's 5 years. Potentially 5 to 8. Is it directly in the sun or is it in the shade? All that makes a difference. We use clear curing compound. We don't spray it white like a lot of other communities, so that helps it fade in. You start getting snow plows bouncing off of it. You get some of the drainage from the yards onto it. So I don't think you can always pick it out if you got an eye for it, but I think after 5 to 8 years, it's kind of blends in better.
So you could wait for a snowplow or send skateboarders out there.
There you go.
Okay.
Scrape it up a little bit.
You touched on something that was important earlier, and I think it involves the cooperation of property owners, but it's this whole notion of building, as we're going along here, building a more resilient system. If our climate is changing and we're seeing more water events, which we are, and we're working other places in town to try to figure out how to better manage stormwater. It seems incumbent upon us to be doing it with all these projects that we're facing as well. So when are we going to hear more from you on this building in resilience to our system that protects not only the city as a whole, but all these individual neighborhoods where they can bounce back quicker? I mean, you can't always just put in a bigger pipe. It's not going to necessarily solve your problem, but that whole notion of a quicker bounce back and less impact, how do we deal with that?
Yep, we recently approved, or the council approved, the Comprehensive Water Resources Management Plan. As part of that plan, we're going to study a specific area of town from that exact perspective: drainage, protection, and flood protection. And what's it look like, and what scale does it need to be done in this area? And hopefully we can apply that citywide. So that study will be done in 2019, and then we're going to, in 2020, do a study in the Lake Cornelia area on clean water. What does clean water look like in that area, and really have an idea of the scale, and then can we spread that through the entire community? Until those studies are done, we still want to address these localized ones on individual projects. So BAR's studying the issue here. I think it's a little more difficult when we're talking about a creek versus just drainage issues in backyards. But we're going to come up and we can bring that proposal back to you when we know more of what the recommendations would be here. You'll see some other improvements that we're setting up the Chowan neighborhood for improved stormwater drainage and stuff. We don't have the buy-in from some residents there yet, and they need to give easements. But at least we'll have some stuff there ready for it, and ready if they ever do see a need for it. So it's really big picture in the next 2 years planning, but we don't want to miss these opportunities as they come for the street recon.
It seemed to me that one of the opportunities here would be, and I don't know if you've calculated it, is you think about Shawnee Circle and Overholt Pass. Everything's running downhill there to Dakota Trail. And so what are we going to do to try to head water off on the way down the hill and also capture it at the bottom so it doesn't take off down Dakota and get to Valley View and you know, who knows where? What's the strategy there with a project like this?
This one we're not addressing on those two streets. It's a pretty small drainage. You're right at the top of the hill. The volume and the amount of water coming down there is not a big thing. We could take an extra step and put in infiltration basins under the street, tree trenches and stuff like that, but we didn't see any. If we did it here, it's only going to benefit like 2 properties on top of the hill. So we'd want to do stuff further down where it's going to have a greater benefit to more properties. So your example on Shawnee and Overholt, really not doing anything to change it there other than narrowing the street. We're generating less stormwater there. That's everywhere. But we really want to address those bigger issues over on the west half of this project on Sally Lane.
Okay, I'll leave that to your judgment, but it strikes me that some of those properties on Dakota Trail that would be at the base of Shawnee Circle would be, you know, at risk for having water running into their backyards. I think they do now. They've told me that they've got water running in their backyards, and they've got drain systems and sump pumps and everything else. So it just seems to me that this is an opportune time to be thinking about capturing stormwater in a more effective way and not just do the same old. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that as we go along here.
Okay, yeah, we can take a look at that.
Okay. Other questions for Director Milner at this point in time? Otherwise, I'll open this matter up for public testimony. I think folks that are interested in the Indian Trails B&C Neighborhood Roadway Reconstruction Project, you're welcome to come forward and give us your thoughts. I think you heard Director Benarod indicate you'd have 3 minutes. You'll get a green light, and then when you've got 30 seconds left, you'll get that amber light. And so then you need to be thinking about wrapping up your comments, and we'll try to stay close to that red light mark. I think if you could hit that right on the mark, that would be very helpful. Then make sure everybody gets treated the same way here. So anybody interested in coming forward and inquiring or commenting regarding the proposed special assessment for Indian Trails B&C neighborhood? And if come to the side, I think, unless you have something you want to display to the council, and then it's a little bit easier. And give us your name and address. And
yep. Okay, great.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Darcy Douglas, and I live at 7025 Comanche Court. So I just had a question about the drainage, actually, kind of along what Mayor Hovland was asking. So with the drainage right now on Sally and actually Comanche Court, Are you guys planning on sending that water down towards the, there's like a drainage area that's back behind the Courtney Fields? Is that where the water is going to go? Because we can put it in drainage pipes, but then it has to go somewhere.
Would you give us your name again, too? Because the microphone wasn't working when you first spoke.
Darcy Douglas
Thank you,
from
Darcy.
7025 Comanche Court.
Okay.
My question was on the drainage. Should I repeat it?
Please repeat it, and then we'll gather these questions up and then cover them at the end.
Okay, sounds good. So the drainage that's coming from Comanche Court and Sally, there's a kind of swampy area back behind the Valley View Road against Courtney Fields. We're gathering up all this drain water. Is that where the water is going to go eventually? Because we can put it in pipes, but it needs to go somewhere, especially when we have larger water events. And then my second question is on Comanche Court just itself. So you're going to shrink it? If I could understand more about what that is, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank
Good.
you.
All right, thanks, Ms. Douglas. We'll cover that. Good evening.
Good evening. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Stephen Min. I live at 7 Overholt Pass. Some neighbors and I from Overholt and Shawnee Circle are here to primarily, we were concerned about the retaining wall. I think I'll compliment Mr. Milner in pulling that off your agenda if that's what's going to happen in today's meeting. Chad has been very transparent and forthcoming in working with us, so we appreciate his efforts. I'll put just a few remarks into the record because I'm waiting to hear what you're going to do with this particular action. I would describe the condition of the walls as adequate to good, and I think in the engineering report it actually says there's some deterioration and a need of some repair. I got a similar remark from my physician when I did my physical this year, so it would not be prudent, in my opinion, to spend almost $300,000 to replace a wall that needs some minor repair, and that's the opinion of most of us. We would like to retain the historic nature of the wall. Whatever you're going to do in the future, we think repair is probably more appropriate than replacement. The entire Dakota Trail system has this type of wall as part of the network, and we'd like to be tied into that neighborhood. I'd also like to raise for your consideration, there's been a recent court case in Minneapolis about 3 years ago that had an opinion about retaining walls that was ruled that the city actually had the obligation to repair and replace that wall. That probably was an antecedent to some of your assessment policy from a couple of years ago, but I think you might want to entertain that discussion in terms of how you move forward. These walls that were built in Overholt and Shawnee are clearly city walls. And I think the court case pointed out that the city has the obligation to maintain those, and I'm not sure you can assess for them. So I think you'll have to at least entertain how you're going to address that system-wide in the future. And the last point I'll make is that we prefer generally as neighbors that the wall system be retained in terms of its current look. Land and Stone is a nice product, but we have a much more natural looking product that's consistent with the rest of Dakota Trail and Valley View, and we would prefer that you maintain that. So thank you for entertaining this and for our concerns. Many of you came out the last week or so, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Min.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Hazem Obeid at 7024 Sally Lane. I have a bunch of questions actually. 2015, I believe, we had reconstruction on Sally Lane, and there was things done. I am wondering why at that time you did not think of doing the other things that you need to do now. The other question is, we have some state funding and we have some taxes that we pay, and I'm wondering what portion of these monies go into such things that you are proposing. The other thing is those retaining walls, in most cases, they belong to the home and to the homeowner. When somebody is interested in buying a home and they look at this retaining wall, I believe it belongs to the house in most cases. especially in the picture that you showed, it is a part of the design of their lawn. It is not a part of the city street that other people should be paying for. The other question, which is to do with the money, when you proposed to do Sally Lane with those 2 sidewalks and retaining wall, I believe at that time you said the project is going to cost $90,000. Was that the right assessment at that time? And if it is not, then are we going to expect more to spend on this project that you are proposing now? The thing is with those fire hydrants also, and pipes that you are replacing, they have a certain lifetime, and depending on the redoing of this project, I mean, why wasn't this done 3 years ago when you dug the street? I still have an issue and a problem with why do we do things 2 or 3 times, and if things are going to cost much more than this, and it's something that you can tag to the property, it's out of the way. But I mean, we work hard for our money. We don't really think that we should spend money on doing the same thing over again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. White. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Michele Swanson, and my address is 6500 Shawnee Circle. Our property obviously is part of the project we're talking about right now, and we're one of the 4 residents in the neighborhood that actually have the wall running along our property line. I want to echo Steve's comments about working with Chad. He's been great to work with. I appreciate the recommendation he made tonight to you folks to remove the wall from the scope of this project, at least for the time being. I think that makes sense for a lot of reasons. As discussed earlier, I don't think this whole wall needs to be replaced or have a new wall in front of it. If you were to drive along Shawnee Circle and Overholt, for the most part, it's in good shape. Admittedly, there are a couple places where it could be shored up a little bit, but I think it'd be much better use of resources to continue to maintain the wall and shore up these small spots rather than do the entire length of the wall. What's unique to our property, though, that I wanted to point out is that wall on the street wraps into our driveway, and then it continues all the way back on our property, and it includes retaining walls with the same stone. So if we were to put a wall in front of a wall, or let's say replace a wall, you know, the city would only come so far into my driveway, because at that point the wall belongs to me and I'm responsible for it. And they would try and blend the new wall into my wall, but eventually the two shall meet and they're not going to match. And I'm wondering, Jennifer, if you can bring up just a couple photos that I had to show them. So while the recommended stone for the wall is similar to my existing stone, it wouldn't match. And then if I wanted to match it, we would be obligated to pay for that. So this is just this Shawnee Circle, coming down Shawnee Circle and then wrapping into my driveway. Okay, I hit the... So this is just continuing into my driveway. You can see my house kind of up and to the left. And then you come back, and it's probably hard to see. I should have done this in the summertime, right? But as you can continue on, you see the steps up the side, and maybe let's go one more further. You can see there's several retaining walls made of the same stone all the way to the back of my property. So that would be a lot of stone to match if we were to change the wall. And I just wanted to highlight that because it's unique to my property. So in conclusion, we support the road reconstruction. We appreciate the recommendation for taking the wall out of the project. And if down the road the council is going to talk about what to do with these walls in the future, hopefully you'll involve the public too, so that we can have some input into that as well. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Trudy Bonvino. I'm also one of the neighbors living adjacent to the project that's being discussed. We live at 6908 Dakota Trail. I'm right adjacent to Michelle's property, and also just wanted to echo the sentiment that we're in support of removing the wall project from the street reconstruction. Although I understand the rationale for addressing the two issues together and considering them as part of the same project, the wall is in relatively good condition. I have lived there since '94, and part of a tear down project we did on our home involved removing the existing driveway where it entered onto Shawnee and relocating it. And the contractor actually removed stone by stone portion of the wall and basically moved it into another spot. And, we found that it's very sound and secure just by moving it. And so I'm confident that, doing limited shoring up of the wall in the spots where we're having some problems, that could take care of it and would be a much better use of the resources. So we appreciate, again, Chad's work. He's been very receptive, and appreciate the council's time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ms. Bonvino.
Hi, Barth Ward, 6504 Shawnee Circle. The corner of Shawnee and Overholt, I too am a wall household. And I want to thank Shad too also. We've met at least 5 times on this project. Very accessible, and thank him for that. And I want to thank you, council, for coming out and most of you, and viewing the wall for yourselves and being part of a conversation with the neighborhood. I just want to say I've been there 20 years, and I have a majority of that wall against my property, and only in 2 times in 20 years have we made repairs to the wall, and we've made repairs ourselves based on contractors with their trucks working in the neighborhood on a project at the end of Overholt, who banged into the wall a couple times, and we just turned to the contractor and had them fix the damage. That's the extent of the maintenance and I've been there since 1998. So I just want to reiterate, we appreciate that you're taking the wall off of the assessment at the time, and in the future, we'll be back to talk about it again. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Ward. Anyone else on this particular project wish to come forward? Okay, seeing no one coming forward and hearing nothing from the audience, is there a motion to close the public hearing with regard to Indian Trails B&C neighborhood proposed roadway reconstruction project?
So moved.
Second.
Second? We've got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Discussion, all those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried? Okay. So right off the bat, I think, Chad, I've got Ms. Douglas, a couple of things. She characterized some of the water issues that they have coming over from, I think, near the ball fields. I was wondering about water management over on that side, and then also why are you proposing shrinking the circumference of Comanche Court and to what?
Yep. So on the drainage side, the water flows Comanche, then it flows west to a culvert. And if it's on Sally, it goes under Valley View Road. The other part of that creek goes behind the properties on Valley View Road that we just reconstructed, Valley View Road, all the way down to the ball fields. There's another culvert that goes towards the golf course or the other direction. So part of BAR's analysis right now is to, if we, like she talked about, put more pipes in, are we going to increase risk or potential damage to people downstream? And we can't do that. So we're trying to find solutions that we can make it better for the people here, but not make it any worse for people downstream. So there may be capacity downstream to push more water downstream, but that's what our analysis is looking at right now to see if we can do that or not. So we'll follow up with residents when we have that understanding, and we can keep her in the loop on that discussion.
I think, yeah, this would all be critical information
Yep.
for all those neighbors over
Yep.
there in terms of water management, stormwater
Yep.
management.
On the cul-de-sac question, This one is rather large, and they're a dead-end street. They don't have a lot of parking anywhere else, so we don't want to shrink that thing down to our typical standard. We just want to do, I would say, in that 3 to 5 feet on each side to fix some of the drainage concerns around there, get a little less pavement we have to maintain, but keep the main size of that cul-de-sac there, work with the residents on how we make that happen, but not a major, we're not going to cut it in half, but I think just like we're doing on our streets, let's do a few feet along our streets, let's do the same kind of theory here on the cul-de-sac to reduce some of those other operations, but keep the majority of that size there.
I think that's a good observation on Comanche Court. When I go in there to visit friends, it's, you know, there's quite a few driveways, so there's few places to park, but it's necessary to be able to park in there.
I've met
So
with
you
a
don't want to
resident.
shrink it up too much.
Yeah, I met with one of our neighbors, and they talk about having parties and parking them across. So we want to make sure they can still do that, but let's see if we can narrow that down from just a maintenance over time estimate and some of the
And
stormwater.
no issues relative to fire department access or
No, it'll
snowplow
be-
access by
Exactly.
shrinking it down, proposed 3 to 5 feet.
That won't be a concern for either one of those parties.
Okay. All right, and then, I guess this is a question for the future. Mr. Min raised a question about, or an issue about whose walls are they, who needs to maintain them, can they be assessed? And I guess we'd have our city attorney look at that somewhere down the line. We're mindful of your recommendation there. Mr. Obeid was wondering, there was some work done in 2015. Thought there was an original assessment, or proposed assessment of around 90,000. And so why are we coming back or proposing to come back only 3 years later when you did some work in 2015? And why didn't you do the fire hydrants in 2015 when you were there? And then we'll talk about the other sources of revenue that could be available to help on some of these projects.
Correct. So in 2014, when we were scoping out the Valley View Road project, we knew there was some major drainage issues up on Sally Lane. That was before we knew the condition of this neighborhood in 2014. So we thought, we're here, this one isn't in our radar for the next 5 years at that point, so let's do something to try to address the stormwater. So all we did was put in a pipe and relayed the pavement on the existing soils. We didn't do any corrections to the soils. We didn't touch other utility infrastructure at that point because our main goal was just to get some kind of stormwater improvements up on Sally. That fall, when we were scoping out that project, this was up for that pavement condition review, and it showed that it had gone down quicker than other neighborhoods, and then it was in the queue starting in 2016. So there was no assessments as part of that Sally Lane portion of the project, but they did see work go through. We did put a pipe in. The lots that are along Valley View Road, they were assessed as part of the Valley View Road assessment, and I think they either got a 1/3 or 2/3 with that. But the rest of those properties, they just saw a pipe go in the ground and some pavement down there. So they weren't assessed for the improvement, and it wasn't a permanent roadway improvement. We were trying to address stormwater at that time before this neighborhood was in the queue for a street recon. Okay. So it was a timing issue. Like he said, we'd love to do everything at once. Our understanding changes every year when we get more data and we make the decisions that we can with the data that we have available.
Yeah, good. You also wondered about what other sources of revenue are available that would help pay for the streets in this. This is probably something we should cover, and that is, what's a state aid street when we do get money from the state that we use in certain ways locally, and you might talk about that a little bit and why this project does or does not, I think, become eligible for that use of those kinds of funds.
Yeah, any city with a population above 5,000 gets money from the gas tax, and that money is dispersed by your needs. And you're able to designate 20% of your roadway network to a municipal state aid network designated as that type of route. So we have 40 miles of municipal state aid roads. Those are typically the streets or roads that have higher traffic volumes, that the traffic volume is more regional in nature, such as Valley View Road on that south portion, 70th Street, Wooddale, 50th. So when we do those reconstruction projects, we pay for 80% of that with the gas tax money or the state money, and then 20% is assessed. In all the projects tonight, we don't have any state aid streets within our project, so it's all local dollars, and local dollars is special assessments. Now, there's other comments about the fire hydrants. That's a utility fund. They're not assessed for fire hydrants. They're not assessed for the sanitary sewer work. And whatever scope of storm sewer work, they won't be assessed for that. So they're assessed for the roads. The other funding sources just don't apply from the municipal state aid system with these projects.
So a general process has been that everybody in town through our utility fund would help pay for everything that has to be done under the street, plus the curb and gutter. And then the residents would pay on a residential equivalent unit basis. You might explain RU too, maybe you did in some of your
Sure.
meetings, but as opposed to linear foot, why we do that.
Yeah, every agency does it a little differently. Some do it by linear foot. We felt that wasn't really an equitable or fair way because you could have a corner lot. You're getting the same transportation benefit out of the street, but you're paying twice because you live on a corner. So we've chosen to use a term called residential equivalent unit, and that's one single-family home. One single-family home, no matter where you are within the neighborhood, are going to generate approximately the same number of trips per day. You're going to use that system the same, so they should be assessed the same. So we use it, that term, a residential equivalent unit. We've been cognizant of the assessment amounts going up, and we've done things over the last 15 years since you've been on the council to address some of those concerns. One is extending the length of the assessment payback from 10 years to 15 years. One other was putting curb and gutter under the stormwater fund. So we're trying to find those things that we can do for the residents to try to limit those impacts. But our current policy today, that's the numbers we're seeing today is what's based on our current policy, spread out over 15 years.
The last question I had, which was, I think, implicit in some of the comments or questions others had, Mr. Ward comes to mind. If we follow your advice and we don't do anything about the wall on Shawnee Circle and Overholt Pass, and we just leave it for another day, would there be a time when, if it was addressed, there would be a chance for public input on what would be done with that particular wall or walls in that Indian Hills neighborhood?
Yeah, I think, this last spring, there was a piece right in front of Michelle's house that fell down, and our public works guys went out there and repaired it. So if there's damage or something like that, they would put in a request with Public Works and we would fix it. If it starts to become too much of an issue, or if we have the discussion citywide, what are we going to do with these walls? We definitely grab and have public input citywide. But I think if there's a spot repair out there, we're going to talk with those owners. They're probably going to tell us because we're not policing all those things, and we'll continue to patch them back together as needed. But yes, I think if we determine a greater policy citywide for walls, that would definitely take public feedback, public engagement, similar to the PAX fund. When we started to look at that system, we had a lot of public feedback to develop that system.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Other council members pick up other questions that I might have missed
Just
in regard to this proposed project. Member Brindle?
thank you. So we talk about what's accessible and what's not accessible, and the simple answer is that the pavement curb to curb is what's accessible, but also the subgrade that's necessary to support that pavement is accessible. And I just wanted to clarify that, because when we talk about what's beneath the street isn't accessible, that's related to the sanitary sewer, that's related to the infrastructure and the utility that's below the street. But if you consider the pavement, the street, and what's under the street, it's just, I think it's important to be really clear that that the subgrade soils that are needed to support the pavement are also part of the street and therefore accessible.
Correct. I would say as an example, if we have to dig water main in the street, the trench that's needed for the water main is paid out of the water main utility up till we get to that base material that needs to support the street. Then that's all assessed. Also, driveway removals, if we need to make adjustments to the street grades, are assessed, and then the restoration and the seeding is assessed too. So, yep.
The other thing I'll mention is that I live in the Indian Trails B and C neighborhood. And so one of the topics of discussion recently has been whether I should recuse myself from this vote, and I've chosen not to, because I don't benefit any more or less than anyone else in the neighborhood. So I'm not going to affect my assessment any differently than anybody else in the neighborhood. So I will go ahead and act on this.
Other questions that council members might have picked up? Member Fisher?
So when I was out looking at the wall on Shawnee Circle and Overholt, it seemed to me that there is some the neighbors talked about, they try to maintain as much as they can, but every once in a while, those roots get kind of thick and it gets beyond just somebody tugging at them. When we're out there doing that street, I mean, does it make sense to have some level of, root removal or something going on there? Or would you just literally not touch these at all during construction?
I would not touch them at all. I would say if we start pulling roots or try to cut roots, we're going to pull blocks out, and then all of a sudden it opens up. Where's it stop, right?
Like pulling the thread.
Pulling the
right?
thread out. So
Okay.
trees and landscaping are supposed to be maintained by the owners. So if it's a weed issue or related to their trees, they should be maintaining that. Vegetation growing through the wall, but I wouldn't want a contractor in there trying to determine, can I pull this one or not, and worry about blocks coming out.
Okay.
Other questions for Director Miller or comments? I'm just looking at the resolution here. We're not adopting any specific cost estimates here that I see. Did you want to hear from the council as to whether we wanted the wall in or out, following your recommendation or overriding that recommendation?
Well, it's in the report as a recommendation, so I think the council should
Motion.
make a motion to either approve that resolution without the walls, and then we'll file that pending assessment without the walls if that's what you so choose. Otherwise, it's still in the report, and we...
Sure. And without, as I understood from your testimony, that without the wall being in the project scope, it would be a $12,475 estimate or per RU for the roadway portion of it, the reduction being a $3,125 amount for the wall.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to remove the retaining walls from Indian Trails B and C Road Reconstruction Project.
And approve resolution.
And approve Resolution 2018-131.
Okay.
Second.
We get a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2018-131 with the exception that the walls on designated for the project in its original proposal be removed, specifically on Shawnee Circle and Overholt Pass. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Next matter is Indian Hills C. And I think Mr. Ditzler has this matter. Mr. Ditzler, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Mayor, council, staff, and residents, thank you for coming tonight to hear about local roadway reconstruction in the Indian Hills C neighborhood. This is improvement number BA 455. Please notice the location map on the screen. There's two local streets. On the north side is Gleason Terrace. On the south side is St. Albans Circle. It's bordered on the east by Municipal State Aid Street, Gleason Road, which is outside the project area. There are 16 properties, 0.15 miles of road, almost 2,200 square yards of street pavement, 2 fire hydrants, and 5 sanitary sewer manholes. We'll talk about a few slides on utilities, beginning with the water main. There's ductile iron and copper water main pipes in the neighborhood. The 1.5-inch copper water main pipes are undersized. Those copper water main pipes are in the bulbs of the 2 cul-de-sacs. The ductile iron water main was investigated using non-invasive testing of the water main, and the ductile iron was determined to be in fair condition. The fire hydrants are original and not to the current city standard, and the gate valves are nearing the end of their useful life.
Therefore, we're proposing to replace all gate valve and upgrade hydrants to the city standard with the stores connection for a quick connection by the fire department. We're going to replace the undersized copper main with a 6-inch ductile iron water main and the associated water services at the cul-de-sac bulbs. We have verified the hydrant spacing and that it does meet public safety standards, so we will not be adding hydrants. The proposed water main improvements are proposed to be paid for through the water utility fund. Existing sanitary sewer, there's clay and ductile iron pipes in the project area in fair condition. There is inflow and infiltration occurring in the system. There's localized sanitary sewer pipe defects. These were documented by city staff televising the sanitary sewer main. The majority of the problems were root intrusion and incrustation. Therefore, we're proposing to install cured-in-place pipe liners to reduce infiltration and provide structural pipe support. Those liners will be done by trenchless method to reduce disruption to the neighborhood during construction. We're also proposing to replace the manhole castings and rings to prevent inflow of clean water to the sanitary sewer system. The sanitary sewer improvements are proposed to be paid for through the sanitary utility fund. The existing storm sewer condition, both the local streets have concrete curb and gutter. There are reinforced concrete and plastic pipes in the neighborhood. There are also localized surface drainage issues that have been verified by resident comments. Therefore, we are proposing spot replacement of concrete curb and gutter, modifications to roadway and/or storm sewer network to improve existing drainage issues, and installing sump drain pipe where feasible. I'm going to take a little bit of time now. Councilmember Fisher mentioned some residents that requested clarification on the curb replacement method, spot curb versus full curb replacement method. So we had one resident on Gleason Terrace, Mr. John Sampson, reach out to us to clarify this. So I figured I'd reiterate that through the Indian Hills presentation here. Typically, we review the existing curb for its condition, look for panels that have been cracked or chips, large chunks out of the condition of the curb. We also look at drainage, if there's flat spots, ponding of water along the curb and gutter. We also look at proposed utility improvements. If there's significant utility improvements required, such as water main replacement and service replacement, those are going to require removal of at least 75% of the curb, and at that point it's not worth trying to do spot curb replacement. If there's basic utility improvements like the installation of a storm sewer inlet that may just require 1 or 2 curb panels to be removed, we'll look at spot curb replacement. So following evaluation of the condition of the curb, drainage along the curb, and the proposed utility improvements, typically if there's 50% or more of the curb that may remain, we look at spot curb replacement. This particular neighborhood, Indian Hills C, roughly between 40 and 45% of the curb needs to be removed. It's very close to that 50% threshold. Therefore, we did evaluate the costs. The roadway cost improvements for full curb replacement increased costs by 15%. Which would increase the assessments 15% as well. Consequently, the storm sewer improvements, costs for those increased 44%. Therefore, we're prioritizing improving drainage concerns over aesthetics when we're utilizing payments through the the storm sewer utility fund. Also being mindful of the stormwater rates that were approved at a recent council meeting. So hopefully that summarizes the spot curb replacement. Got a
Member
question
Brindle?
from-
Thank you. So I want to go back to something you just said and make sure I heard it correctly. That curb replacement, you're kind of on the bubble of doing it all or doing a spot curb replacement.
That's
And
correct.
if you did it all, it would increase the cost by 15%?
So we've got roadway costs and we've got storm sewer costs. So looking at the roadway column for the cost improvements, those costs would go up 15%.
How would the roadway cost go up 15% if it's the replacement of the curb?
Good question, Member Brindle. So the behind the curb and gutter is topsoil and seed and excavation of the existing topsoil behind the curb. So primarily that 15% makes up the improvements behind the curb and gutter. The removal of that current material, topsoil behind the curb, the installation of new topsoil, seed, as well as driveway removals and replacement. Those would be those 15% increases in the roadway column.
Okay, thank you.
Continuing.
That tends to beg the question. It's something that I don't know if we've ever talked about before. Is I guess at least I assumed when we were paying for curb and gutter out of the stormwater utility fund that it would mean that we would be paying all costs associated with installing curb and gutter, not just the curb and gutter itself, but if it required new substrate or just topsoil behind it to stabilize what we would be doing. Why wouldn't that be part of the cost of the curb and gutter?
It's a good question. Historically, those costs, the restoration behind the curb, the topsoil and seed have been in the roadway column historically.
And I can add, before the policy was changed, all those costs were assessed. So the conversation with the council was just the curb and gutter piece, and all those other costs were still assessed. So if that's an item of concern for the council, that could be added, but that's going to really change those costs. As you heard, just on this one alone would increase those stormwater 40%. So I think it's trying to balance assessments with what our utilities can afford. So that's been the practice. Anything behind the curb has been assessed based on the original policy years ago.
Good questions. Continuing on with the roadway, the streets originally, Gleason Terrace was originally constructed in 1969, St. Albans Circle in 1978. The average street width is 30 feet. The soil base underneath the asphalt pavement is primarily silty sand. We have observed through soil testing that there's some clayey sand present as well. Those soil materials contribute to the condition of the asphalt pavement you see in the photograph. The city, through their proactive pavement management program, regularly rates the streets every 4 years and assigns a condition index ranging from 0, which is essentially a gravel street, all the way to 100, which is a brand new street. The average pavement condition index for this City of Edina streets is 72, and the average condition index for Indian Hills C is 14. Therefore, the pavement is reaching the end of its useful life. Therefore, we're proposing to completely reconstruct to the subgrade, similar to the Indian Trails B and C neighborhood. Through our soil investigation, there's an apparent lack of gravel underneath the asphalt pavement, really making recycling the existing pavement material infeasible. Therefore, we're going to be removing the asphalt pavement. Be doing subgrade corrections as needed. The presence of those clayey sand soils increases the likelihood of subgrade corrections and replacing with more stable soils. We're also proposing no changes to the existing widths or the parking availability. There's also some amenities adjacent to the edge of the roadway that are in the right-of-way. Amenities such as landscaping items, mailboxes, irrigation systems, and pet fences These amenities may or may not be impacted during construction. If they are, the landscaping items will be replaced, mailboxes will be reinstalled, and irrigation and fences will be repaired by the contractor. All right, let's look at the project cost and the associated funding sources. The roadway cost $179,550 through special assessments. Sanitary sewer, water main, and storm sewer costs total $199,650 through their various utility funds. The total project cost, $379,200. Those project costs include construction contingency, engineering, clerical, and finance costs. For this particular project, the special assessments, the ratio of those costs for the total project cost is about 47%, primarily due to the minimal utility work proposed on this project. Special assessments are assigned to benefiting properties of public improvements per state statute, Chapter 429. These will cover 100% of the roadway costs, including roadway and driveway removals, subgrade materials, asphalt pavement, and restoration. I'll take the time to reiterate that utility improvements such as sanitary sewer, water main, storm sewer, curb and gutter costs not included in the roadway assessment costs. What are included are indirect costs, engineering, finance, soil investigations, and mailings. Proposed assessments for the neighborhood. We've got 16 properties. Again, properties are assigned based on a REU, or residential equivalent unit. Those are based on single-family homes and not contingent on the lot size. The properties shown in blue will be assigned 1 REU. The properties shown in pink will be assigned a 0.5 REU due to one side of their properties adjacent to a roadway that's outside the project limits. Therefore, taking the proposed roadway cost and dividing it by the proportional REUs, we get an estimated $13,300 per REU. Let's again review the payment options for special assessments. Final assessment amount will be mailed to property owners 1 year after the project completion. That mailing is estimated in February 2020. Payment options include paying the entire amount upon receiving the bill within 30 days to avoid future interest charges, or paying a minimum of 25% within 30 days, the balance rolling over to property taxes over 15 years. Also rolling the entire amount over to property taxes over 15 years. And finally, deferring the payment if 65 years of age or older and meeting specific income requirements. Let's review the project schedule. We held open houses in the summer of 2016 and 2017 at the Public Works facility. We also held an informational meeting back on August 13th. That meeting had a little bit more details about the neighborhood, specifically where we proposed spot curb replacement. Edina Transportation Commission reviewed the study at its meeting on October 25th. Council received the engineering study December 4th. And tonight, the council will decide whether or not to move forward with the improvement. If the council chooses to move forward with the improvement, plans and specifications will be prepared in December through February. Contractor bid opening would occur in March and April 2019. Due to the small size of the Indian Hills C neighborhood, this project is likely going to be proposed to be packaged with the Indian Trails B and C project to provide better pricing, volume pricing for a larger project. If we were to bid this project on its own with such a small size, it would likely have significantly higher costs associated with it. Council would consider awarding the construction contract and beginning construction in spring of 2019. Construction would be completed fall 2019, followed by warranty work by the contractor the following spring, and concluding with the assessment hearing fall 2020. Staff believes the project is feasible, cost-effective, and necessary to improve the public infrastructure. Therefore, staff's recommending approval of resolution number 2018-134, authorizing the Indian Hills C neighborhood roadway reconstruction. So that concludes the presentation, and we'll take some time for questions from the council.
Thank you, Mr. Ditzler. Nicely done. Questions for Mr. Ditzler at this point in time? Member Stewart.
Thank you. I'm glad you made that last point about, I expressed some concern about these small projects. This one has only 13 and a half REUs. I think we have one coming up that has 7 or less REUs. And I wanted to make sure that the residents who live in those small areas are not effectively penalized because we've got such small projects going on. And so having it bundled together with the bigger projects so that we can get some economies of scale for them as we redo their streets, I think is really important. So I'm glad you brought that up. I think it would be a shame to have people paying more because we happen to divide up their home into an area that had only a handful of REUs. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else at this point in time? Member Fisher?
Another question that could apply to all of these is pretty much, all this street reconstruction we're doing, all this utility rework, is this the first time it's really happened since all of these streets were built? So I'm assuming, 1969, 1978, that's when these little neighborhoods were built out.
Correct.
And has that kind of been the case going back, before I was sitting here? I mean, this isn't the third time on any of these streets, is it?
No, I can take that one. So it is the first time on many of these neighborhoods, and the program really didn't start till the early 2000s when street recon started. So we really had that, when you put the infrastructure in the 50s and 60s, you get this whole period of, you get to reap the benefits of it.
You get 50 or 60 years of a
Yep.
free ride.
Now it's infrastructure replacement mode, and we've started that in the early 2000s. And this is the first time through kind of the cycle of these streets. And you saw the graph I presented earlier showing how much of each system we've replaced just in the last 6 years. But we could do that as a system-wide if we have all the data, which we don't. We'd have to go back. We're trying to build that data to tell that story better all the time.
So are we thinking that when we rebuild these, that we're going to get another 50, 60 years? Is that the goal here?
Exactly.
Okay. So when people are paying 15 years on, if they stretch the assessment, hopefully they get another long stretch,
Correct.
of assuming we all just live in one place forever, right?
Yeah. So that was that deflection in the PCI data that you saw with a little extra budget. Andrew put together a lot of data where we think we can get 50 years out of these streets with proper maintenance, submitted at these proper times of 7 years, 15 years, 30 years of mill and overlays and seal coats.
So when you go back in history, whether, we've heard tonight already, water mains that aren't big enough or water pipes that aren't big enough by today's standards, all of this stuff was sort of given, the developer builds out a neighborhood and then they gift it to the city, right? And so over time, whether we should have accepted the gift or not may be debatable, but we're just trying to pick up all of that and make it right moving forward.
Correct.
What we need. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Fisher. You've caused me to ask Manager Neal to maybe comment for folks in the audience why we have this street reconstruction project. What's important about it relative to maintaining what we own and also to the rating agencies?
Well, members of council, Mayor Hovland, yes, the rating agencies that we talk to when we have a chance, when they're doing our credit rating, when they're rating us for bond issues, look at our investment in our existing infrastructure very carefully. They think that's a measure of your prudence as elected officials. They think that's important for our community, especially an older community like Edina that's over 100 years old. They're measuring that very carefully for us, and we stack up very positively in the various metrics that they use to measure us. And it's been one of the important factors in continuing our AAA rating with two of the major credit rating agencies.
And for those in the audience that you may have heard us talk about this before, but all of us as residents of Edina have a city that has what we call a double AAA bond rating. So there's probably 36 cities in the country our size that have a double AAA bond rating from Standard & Poor's and Moody's. And so it lets us borrow money when we have to do some of these projects at the lowest possible rates, and it's important to be able to do that. We believe that's critical for our residents to do the best job we can fiscally. And of course, one of the things these rating agencies look at that I've realized over time is, are you taking care of what you own or are you deferring? And for those cities that defer, it's reflected in their bond rating and their borrowing costs. So we've been good about trying to maintain what we own and going about this street reconstruction in a deliberate way. It's not so pleasant to be living here right now, 50 years in, and many of us won't be around 50 years from now, but nonetheless, these are things that need to be done. Any other questions for Manager Neal?
And Mayor, the only other thing I will add to that is that fiscal advantage that we gain through that credit rating gets passed on to our residents by lower borrowing costs. Right? They see it directly, especially in a special assessment project like this.
Okay, Mr. Disler, stand by. Member Brindle?
Yeah, I have one, thank you. And I wish I had remembered this or thought of it in the last public hearing, but when we have a street reconstruction project, we actually encourage property owners to consider upgrading their water service line. And so I would like you to talk about that, please.
This is the sewer warranty line program, correct?
No.
Nope.
Oh, excuse me, sorry.
So I'll take that one.
Okay, thank you.
So we're in there doing a lot of utility work, so we think it's a benefit for having the residents do their private utilities at the same time. So if it's approved tonight, then we start sending letters out this winter saying, here's a list of plumbers. Please consider looking at your sewer pipe because you get tree roots or other defects in that line, or your water service from the shutoff valve to your house. Get a plumber in there, look at it, get some estimates, and if you want, you could replace one or both of those, and we'll allow you to put that on your assessment with the street project so you can spread that cost over 15 years. So it's a benefit to the city to have those pipes fixed, and it's a benefit to the residents, and we finance it up front and they pay it out over 15 years. So it's a program that they'll be getting letters here this winter, no matter what neighborhood they live in, to consider that in the future. And if they have any questions about it, when they get the letter, they can call us and we can answer those.
Okay, thank you. It's possible that the line that was installed when the home was built is smaller than the line that would be installed today. So, so in some cases, it may be a benefit to the homeowner to consider that seriously for the water supply line that might be able to be a larger line today than it was when your house was built, like ours 50 years ago.
Correct.
So.
The proposed neighborhood roadway reconstruction project for Indian Hills C neighborhood is a public hearing matter, and I'm going to open it up now for public testimony. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to come forward and address the council on a matter of concern to them or inquire regarding this particular proposed project? Feel free to come forward. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I am Mike Hutner. I live at 6628 Gleason Terrace. And both of these roads are cul-de-sacs, and so we're a little concerned about access issues while the construction project is ongoing. Specifically on my street, we have a wheelchair-bound resident that could be an issue. There's no parking on essentially on Gleason Road. So we're kind of concerned about that, how we are going to get to our houses during the construction. And the other thing you brought up about that Gleason Road is not in the project, but as far as drainage issues go, where Gleason Terrace meets Gleason Road, that's kind of a depression there, and there's always, as long as I've been there the last 20 years, a pond anytime it rains or water melts right where Gleason Road meets Gleason Terrace, and it's anywhere from 2 to 3 inches deep depending upon the precipitation event. So something while you're there really needs to be done with Gleason Road itself so we don't have to put up with that ponding anymore. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks, Mr. Hutner. We'll get to those questions and comments in due course. Good evening.
Hi, I actually am Mike's neighbor. My name is Melissa Brooks, and I live at 6632 Gleason Terrace. And I would like to echo what Mike just mentioned about both accessibility to the cul-de-sac. During the construction, I saw driving around Edina last summer, roads, completely torn up and people unable to park. We can't park on Gleason, so that would be one question I have. A second question I have is I am one of the units that's a 0.5. So I'm curious, when is Gleason going to be on a project? I don't know if I've reviewed some of the materials, but I don't know how much farther out that's going to be. An aesthetic question I have is all the pictures you have show the curbs being kind of more rounded, where currently today they're sloped. I have a 4 and a 6-year-old who don't understand running into curbs is a bad idea. So curious how that's going to look. And then my last question is around the extending out for the 15 years. You've mentioned good credit ratings and things like that. If you extend it out for the 15 years, is there an interest rate associated with that when you put it on your property tax? Or is that just a straight 15-year assessment and you get the benefit of any inflation? So those are my questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Anyone else? Okay. Nobody from St. Albans? All right. Seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
A motion second to close the public hearing. Discussion, those in favor of closing the public hearing regarding Indian Hills C neighborhood, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. So let's go back, let's go through the access issue. Both folks raised that, and this is an issue we face other places too. Where do construction workers park? Where do these folks park within a cul-de-sac when you're doing a project and got the whole cul-de-sac torn up? What do we do?
Yep. So we will have, again, we're going to be replacing the water main in the cul-de-sac bulb. So we'll be notifying residents of when that will occur specifically. That work will likely be completed in 1 day or less, likely half a day. We'll notify property owners of appropriate places to park. We'll identify safe places to park. As far as general access, there'll be no open trenches overnight. Each and every evening you can re-access your driveway. The only exception to that will be if curb needs to be replaced just in front of your driveway. We need that concrete to cure sometime between 5 and 7 days. So we ask property owners to park on the street just adjacent to the curb while that concrete gains sufficient strength, and then therefore can re-access your driveway and garage.
Okay, and then so how about if someone has a person with a disability in their home and now it's time to park in the street while you're letting the concrete cure out, or there's some other circumstance that requires people park in the street, how do we provide access for people that have disabilities to make sure they can get to and from their homes?
Yep. Well, step one is notify the city. We're going to be implementing a project website for this project where we'll have contact information. We'll have staff on site every day during construction. So step one is call the city and notify us that you have access concerns. We will coordinate with the contractor and make any special needs necessary, any unique deliveries. They need emergency access. We'll work with the contractor to make those things happen for residents.
Okay.
I'd say an example is sometimes we build the aprons half at a time. Sometimes we build a little temporary gravel driveway on the side so they can still drive in and out if it's an issue. So I think just what Aaron said, let's just make sure we know about it, understand the needs, and there's ways we can use high early concrete to make that cure a lot faster and get them in. We can put gravel over the top of it sooner too, so we can work through those issues.
Just to piggyback on that, I think that the questions really go to, there's something unique about this particular project because Gleason is hard to park on, or not allowed, and I don't know that there would be enough room on the cul-de-sac for everybody to park all their cars outside there on the street. On our run-of-the-mill streets, you know, there's probably plenty of street parking to be able to accommodate that. So how do we deal with that in this particular situation?
Well, it is spot repair curb, so it's not all coming out. So some driveways might be open the whole time other than these utility digs.
Okay.
We may do one cul-de-sac at a time because there's a sidewalk between them. That doesn't help the issue with some of the mobility concerns, but it would help most people. They could probably park on the other one. We could work on one and swap it out. So those are the details we'd work out with the contractor.
And then with the neighbors as well,
Neighbors
just
too,
making
yep.
sure as the project's moving forward that everybody understands what they can, so people don't have to
Yep.
carry their groceries 6 blocks
Yep,
from
exactly.
parking.
There's going to be times where it's difficult, and then
Right.
as long as we notify them, they can plan in advance. Do your grocery shopping
Right.
on a Sunday, and then you'll have some issues on Monday or Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
You probably could make some arrangement with St. Albans Episcopal Church, but that is still a pretty good hike when you
Yep,
using
with a hill.
groceries and other things.
That's when you use a grocery delivery service.
They can't get in either.
It's their problem.
So, Mr. Huttner also raised the issue of water gathering at the base of Gleason Terrace at Gleason Road, and I think his recommendation is that we look at some sort of water management there, maybe a catch basin, looking and seeing whether we need to add a catch basin at that point to accommodate some of this water and get rid of some of this pooling.
Yeah, we're in luck. There's storm sewer at Gleason Road there. So we can make modifications to the geometry and help the curb drain better and get to that catch basin. If we can't do that, then we can extend storm sewer to solve some of those drainage issues.
Okay, yeah, take a close look at that, I think, and get some advice from some of those folks that have been living there for a long time. I think they'd be good resources for you.
Thank you.
Ms. Brooks, she's a .5 REU proposed, and so she's wondering the other half, that other shoe would fall for her if Gleason Road gets redone. I don't know if there's anything on the horizon for Gleason Road or not, but you could maybe talk about that a little bit.
There is proposed maintenance on Gleason Road, not street reconstruction, but maintenance in 2021. So some improvements for Gleason Road.
But that would be non-accessible.
Correct. Correct. So it would be some future year down the line where that other 1/2 REU would occur when Gleason Road is reconstructed.
Somewhere beyond 2022 or
Correct.
2022 or later. Yeah, okay. All right, and then
But usually when we do maintenance, how many years do we get out of that?
It depends on the operation, but typically 10 years if we do a mill and overlay or a
Right.
seal coat. So it's going to be
So it would be in the
late.
30s.
Could probably, most likely we're back 10 years at least.
And then I think her other question was conventional curb. They've got surmountable curb there now, what we call surmountable, which is the gentle slope up. And so why don't you talk about why we prefer the conventional curb as opposed to the surmountable curb that exists in parts of our town?
My understanding, yeah, the bulkhead curb is the city standard that aids in street sweeping operations as well as protects the boulevards from things like snow plows and damages and the like.
Also damages to yards from people just driving up.
Correct, true. Good point.
However, if surmountable curb is currently there, then the spot repair would be replaced with surmountable curb.
That's correct.
Okay, great.
Okay, yeah, good point. And then interest rates. I think Manager Neal, you mentioned that when we borrow at the lowest rates possible, the residents benefit from that, and that there is interest charged on the outstanding balance.
Yeah, 1, right? Chad?
Well, it's 1% above what we can borrow. So the total number the last few years has been between 3 and 4% is what's been put onto the assessments over those 15 years, and it's locked in when that assessment is levied in the year after construction when it's filed with the county.
Okay. All right, good, thank you. Other council comments? I think we caught most of them there. There is a resolution regarding this proposed project. It is embodied in Resolution 2018-134, which would accept the engineering study and approve the Indian Hills C Neighborhood Roadway Reconstruction Improvement Project, embodied in BA 455, authorized plans and specifications to be completed and bids taken. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2018-134?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and second to adopt resolution number 2018-134, which would affect the Indian Hills C neighborhood. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And then, Mr. Ditzler, you have the next matter as well, which is Chowan Park A and B neighborhood.
Okay, Mayor, Council, staff, and residents, thank you for coming tonight to hear about local roadway and alley reconstruction in the Chowan Park A and B neighborhood. Please notice the project location. This is in the northeast corner of the city. The project is bounded on the south by West 60th Street, on the east by Xerxes Avenue, on the north by West 58th Street, and on the west by France Avenue. There are 308 properties within the project area. There's 1.9 miles of road. Those roadways are shaded in yellow. Got 0.4 miles of gravel alley. Those are shown in red. 0.5 miles of concrete alley. Those are shown in blue. Over 32,000 square yards of street pavement. 29 fire hydrants. 26 fire hydrants and 29 sanitary sewer manholes. Again, we're going to be talking some utilities here, beginning with the water main. We've got cast iron pipes in the neighborhood. Again, the city has investigated the condition of the water mains through non-invasive technology, determined that those cast iron pipes are in poor condition. That's essentially been verified by the many water main breaks that have been in this neighborhood relative to previous projects. The fire hydrants are original and not to the current city standard. And the gate valves are nearing the end of their useful life. Therefore, we're proposing water main improvements by replacing all the water main pipe and water services within the right-of-way. Upgrading that cast iron to ductile iron pipe. That'll be a water main pipe bursting, which is a trenchless method, again, used to prevent disruption to construction in the neighborhood. We're proposing to replace all the gate valves and upgrade the hydrants to the city standard with the stores connection for quick connection by the fire department. And we'll verify the appropriate hydrant spacing and add hydrants if needed to meet the public safety standards. Again, these water main improvements will be paid for through the Water Utility Fund. There's clay pipes in fair condition in this neighborhood. There's inflow and infiltration occurring as well in the system, as well as localized sanitary sewer pipe defects. Those were noted by city staff televising the sanitary sewer main. The majority of problems, again, include root intrusion and incrustation. Therefore, we are proposing spot trunk pipe repairs. Those were repairs noted through reviewing the televising of the sanitary sewer main. Those repairs will be done by open cut trench repair. Those repairs are primarily small in nature, so less than 20 feet. So not super invasive to the neighborhood. We're also proposing cured in place pipeliners to reduce infiltration and provide structural pipe support. That pipelining, again, is a trenchless method, so reduces disturbance during construction. We're also replacing manhole castings and rings to prevent inflow of clean water into the sanitary sewer system. Again, the sanitary sewer improvements are proposed to be paid for through the sanitary sewer utility fund. Existing storm sewer condition, most streets in the neighborhood do not have concrete curb and gutter. There are corrugated metal and reinforced concrete pipes. There's relatively few storm sewer and few inlets in the project area. Localized surface drainage issues are present, as you can see in the photograph, and have been verified by resident comments. Similar to the Indian Trails B and C neighborhood, we've got the comprehensive water resource management plans identified areas of flood inundation for both the 10% and 1% annual chance flood events. That's shown in red in the photograph. You can see underneath that flood shape a number of home structures could be impacted by flood events. We're proposing modifications to the roadway by improving street grades, as well as storm sewer to improve existing drainage issues by extending storm sewer pipe. Proposing to replace the curb and gutter due to its poor condition, the replacement of the water services, and extension of storm sewer. We're also proposing to add curb and gutter where none exists today. So we'll have a cohesive curb and gutter system throughout the Chowan Park neighborhood, as well as installing the sump drain pipe where feasible based on storm sewer availability and grades. I want to take a moment to discuss the flood shapes again. Due to these flood shapes, we are proposing to add storm sewer on Chowan Avenue and extend that up from West 60th Street. We also identified a backyard depression area between Chowan Avenue and Beard Avenue. And that flood shape, as you can see, overlaps some home structures. So the engineering department reached out to those residents to inquire about any concerns with flooding. And heard back there's no significant issues during heavy rainfall events in this area. Therefore, we're not proposing any backyard storm connection here. However, due to the extension of the storm sewer pipe on Chowan Avenue, if things change in the backyards, we could provide a future backyard storm connection. Existing roadway condition, the streets were originally constructed between 1925 and 1960. The street widths vary between 28 feet and 30 feet. The sand base beneath the asphalt pavement is primarily silty sand. There are some pockets of clayey sand in this neighborhood as well. Again, the city's proactive pavement management program, these streets are rated regularly every 4 years and assigned a pavement condition index ranging from 0 for streets that are totally failed or gravel streets up to 100, which is a brand new street. The City of Edina network average pavement condition is 72, and the Chowan Park A and B neighborhood average is 27. Proposed roadway improvements, again, through our soil boring analysis, noted lack of gravel underneath the asphalt pavement. Therefore, recycling existing pavement materials is infeasible. Again, we'll be removing that existing asphalt pavement. Subgrade corrections as necessary. Again, we've got some presence of some clayey sand in this neighborhood. Clayey soils increase the probability that we need to do subgrade correction and replace with more stable soils. Proposing to construct new roadway section. Those roadway sections include 27-foot street widths proposed. We're proposing no change to parking availability on the majority of the neighborhood, so parking on both sides. The exception being Beard Avenue, we're proposing 24 feet wide with parking on only one side. That's due to the sidewalk, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the future. I also want to take a little bit of time at this moment to address, we are proposing a 27-foot street width on 59th Street. That's included in the study at 27 feet. However, the notice to residents to attend the public meeting this evening noted that we were proposing to do 24 feet for 59th Street. That was an idea that we considered, and Director Milner mentioned that we probably need to do some outreach to those residents, which hasn't been done. Therefore, we are going to propose that 59th Street be 27 feet wide, and that recommendation is in the study today. So I apologize for any confusion on that the notice for tonight had. Living Streets Plan, the 27 and 24-foot street widths that we're proposing are guidelines included in the Living Streets Plan. Benefits of that include less impervious surface. As Director Milner mentioned, we've reduced impervious by 5.5 acres over the last 10 years. That's improved stormwater management as well. Benefits also include traffic calming. Through our questionnaire results, there's a number of residents that were concerned about speeding in the neighborhood, so traffic calming is a benefit of the narrower street widths, as well as reduced life cycle costs and initial costs for narrowing pavement. Also included in the Living Streets Plan recommends parking along the sidewalk side. Benefits of that includes improved line of sight and pedestrian safety. Let's look at the Pedestrian Facilities Plan. I want to note that the Pedestrian Facilities Plan prior to 2018 did not include a sidewalk on Beard Avenue in the Chowan Park neighborhood. In 2017, even going back further, Strachauer Park added a sidewalk just south of the project area along Beard Avenue, just south of the project limits. Therefore, in 2017, it was proposed to add sidewalk to Beard Avenue in the Chowan Park neighborhood. At the public hearing, the council approved the addition of the new plan to include sidewalk on Beard Avenue in Chowan Park at its meeting on February 13th. Prior to that hearing, there were 2 citywide public meetings that residents were invited to, as well as 3 unique pop-up workshops to discuss changes with the Pedestrian Facilities Plan, as well as welcoming input through questionnaire and website. So therefore, we are proposing sidewalk along Beard Avenue. And again, Beard Avenue is proposed at 24 feet wide. We're proposing a 5-foot sidewalk on the east side with a 5-foot boulevard between the concrete curb and gutter and the sidewalk. The sidewalk on the east side is continuous with existing sidewalk to the south in the Strachauer Park neighborhood. There are future sidewalks adjacent to the project area proposed. Please notice just north of the project area along Beard Avenue, a sidewalk is proposed, as well as east and west on West 60th Street in the future, as well as West 58th Street, East and West Street in the future. I want to take a moment to note the proximity to West 58th Street with the Chowan Park neighborhood. Chowan Park is proposed for reconstruction in 2019. West 58th is proposed to be reconstructed, anticipated in 2020. So those the limits between West 58th Street and Chowan Park will slightly overlap at West 58th Street. And residents adjacent to 58th Street will endure street reconstruction for 2 consecutive years. I do want to note 58th Street is a municipal state aid street, and 58th Street is proposed to be a pilot program for a public participation process. I do want to make note that West 58th Street has no bearing on the public hearing this evening. It's strictly for reference due to the proximity to Chowan Park. Moving on to the alleys, we've got existing gravel alleys. These alleys were constructed between 1925 and 1960. The widths vary between 10 and 15 feet. The base material under the gravel alleys is silty sand with some clay sand material, as indicated by soil borings. We also have surface drainage issues as shown in the photograph and as verified by resident comments. We've also got concrete alleys in the project area. Those streets were originally constructed between 1925 and 1960. The concrete pavement is in pretty good shape. There's no significant deficiencies in that concrete pavement. Therefore, we're proposing no improvements to the concrete alleys. Potentially in the future, maybe some removal of weeds growing through the joints, maybe some crack sealing in the future by the Public Works Department. We are proposing alley improvements in the gravel alleys. We're going to be proposing subgrade corrections as needed. Again, we've got presence of some clay material underneath the gravel alleys. We are proposing a new pavement section for gravel alleys. This is the 4 inches of asphalt pavement. This is the same typical section as proposed on the roadway for Chowan Park A and B. Of note, a petition was received in 2016 for paving along one of the gravel alleys. I also want to take time to note, this is a good opportunity to improve these gravel alleys. Again, economics of scale, larger project to do these gravel alleys with the larger local street reconstruction for Chowan Park. If these gravel alleys were done separately on their own, very likely that cost could be much higher for improving the gravel alleys. There are some existing amenities along the edge of the roadway within the right-of-way. Again, landscaping features, outwalks and steps, along with the irrigation system and pet fences. With full curb proposed for this neighborhood, landscaping features immediately adjacent to the roadway are likely to be disturbed during construction. I'll work with homeowners on that and replace them to the best of our ability. As well as outwalks and steps will be replaced with construction. And contractor will repair irrigation systems and pet fences impacted by construction. All right, let's review the project costs and their associated funding sources. The roadway proposed at just over $2.4 million with special assessments. The alley costs $217,000 proposed through special assessments. Utility improvements, sanitary sewer, water main costs significant. As you recall, full replacement of water main and associated water services, nearly $2 million of improvements. Storm sewer as well, almost $1.4 million of storm sewer improvements. Reminder, curb and gutter is included in those costs. So $3.7 million of utilities through the various city utility funds. And sidewalk proposed along Beard Avenue, $89,600, supposed to be paid for through the Pedestrian and Cyclist Safety, or PACS fund. Therefore, the total project cost just over $6.4 million. Included in those costs are construction contingency, engineering, clerical, and finance costs. The roadway special assessments are about 38% of the overall project costs. The alley costs are about 3% of the overall project cost. So the combined roadway and alley, about 41% of the project costs, lower than the Indian Hills C neighborhood, likely due to the increase of utility proposed improvements. Again, special assessments are assigned to benefiting properties of public improvements per state statute, Chapter 429. This covers 100% of the roadway and the alley costs, including roadway and driveway removals, subgrade materials, asphalt pavement, and the topsoil and turf restoration behind the curb and gutter. I just want to emphasize again, not included in the special assessments, sanitary sewer not included, water main not included, storm sewer not included, curb and gutter not included, sidewalk not included. However, what is included? Indirect costs again, engineering, finance, soil investigations, and mailings. Let's review the estimated roadway assessments. Again, there's 308 properties proposed to be assessed through residential equivalent units per single-family home. The properties highlighted in green are proposed at 0 REUs. Those properties are not adjacent to a roadway within the project area. The properties in blue are proposed to be assessed 1 REU per single-family home. And the properties in pink are proposed to be assessed 0.5 REUs due to they have a street located adjacent to their property that's outside the project limit. So on the north side of the project, West 58th Street, assuming West 58th Street occurs through improvements, the other half of those REUs will be proposed through the 2020 project. Therefore, taking the roadway project cost, $2.4 million, divided by the appropriate proportional REUs, we get an estimated assessment of $9,000 per REU. Again, we've got alley improvements, so the estimated alley assessments. The properties in green are proposed at 0 REUs because they're not adjacent to an alley to be improved. The properties in blue are proposed at 1 REU. Therefore, we take the $217,000 project cost for the alley improvements divided by the 62 REUs. We get an estimated $3,500 assessment per REU. Because we've got combinations of assessments with this project, I thought it'd be helpful to show the total estimated assessments. We've got assessments ranging from $3,500 to $12,500. For example, we've got alley-only improvements. Those are shown in blue, or the dark blue. Those are $3,500. Road-only, those are $9,000. Those are the properties in orange. And we've got the properties in red, which are the roadway and alley, which are proposed at $12,500. We do have 3 properties in purple that do not have a roadway improvement, and likewise they're adjacent to a concrete alley, which is not proposed to be improved. And we've got the green properties and the light blue properties, which have appropriate corner lot properties for roadway and or alley improvements. So moving on to the payment options for special assessments, we've got final assessment amount being mailed to property owners 1 year after the project completion. Mailing is scheduled for fall 2020. The payment options include paying the entire amount upon receiving the bill within 30 days to avoid future interest charges, paying a minimum 25% within 30 days. The remaining balance rolls on to property taxes over 15 years for the roadway assessment. That term changes to 5 years for the alley improvements. Likewise, roll the entire amount over property taxes over 15 years for the roadway assessments. Again, that term changes to 5 years for the alleys. Finally, deferring payment if 65 years of age or older and meet specific income requirements. Again, let's review the project schedule. Open houses were held summer 2016 and 2017 at the Public Works Facility, as well as a neighborhood informational meeting on August 13th. We had more details at the August 13th meeting. Specifically, we told residents about the full water main replacement and the associated water service replacement. We also mentioned proposed improvements to sidewalk along Beard Avenue at that meeting. We have the Edina Transportation Commission reviewed the study at its meeting on October 25th. The Transportation Committee recommended approval of the proposed sidewalk along Beard Avenue. Council received the engineering study on December 4th. Again, tonight is the public hearing where the council will vote tonight whether or not to move forward with the improvements. If so, plans and specifications will be prepared in December through February. Bid opening would occur in March and April 2019. The council would consider awarding a construction contract and beginning construction in spring 2019. And construction complete fall 2019, followed by contractor warranty work the following spring, and concluding with the final assessment hearing in fall 2020. So staff believes the project is feasible, cost-effective, and necessary to improve the public infrastructure. Therefore, we recommend approving resolution number 2018-132, authorizing the Chowan Park A and B neighborhood roadway and alley reconstruction. That concludes the presentation, and this time we'll take time for questions from the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Disler. Questions for council members? Member Stewart?
Just two quick items. On the map of where it showed the sidewalks, I can't tell whether or not the sidewalk on 58th and on 60th will be on the north or south because that will be decided at a future time. Is that right?
Correct. West 50th and West 68th
right.
In the future. That's correct.
And then, I guess my other question was answered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there's, at this point in time, we got a couple for you, Mr. Disler. You mentioned that you're proposing the width of Beard at 24 feet, the other streets at 27 feet. Is the proposed width of Beard at 24 feet consistent with the width of Beard south of 60th Street, where I think there was reconstruction done and a sidewalk put in?
I believe it is. I'm going to ask Director Milner if he can confirm that. I believe that is true.
Yep, that's true. 24 feet south with a sidewalk and a boulevard. Okay. Same recommendation we're proposing here tonight.
In walking that neighborhood, I recall that it's a boulevard-style sidewalk as opposed to behind the bulkhead.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that was one of the other questions I had. And then with respect to the alleys that are proposed for reconstruction and assessment, how do you go about addressing the drainage issues that might exist in an alley? I didn't see anything in your presentation about addressing drainage.
Yes, good question, Mayor. We'll look at improving grades as we can. There is a storm sewer system along one of the alleys. The exact location we can confirm. And essentially, we're going to drain the alleys the best we can by adjusting the grades the best we can. There is a lack of storm sewer in the neighborhood. We could look at extending some sump drain pipe to improve some drainage as well. That's another option.
So if you tend to rely on gravity and the way you form the alleyway as a basis for draining it to an adjacent street, then what are we doing? We're taking away a gravel alleyway and we're replacing it with an asphalt surface that would promote faster drainage, maybe more volume. Mm-hmm. Probably more volume. How are we going to manage that water that comes out of those alleys off a hard surface as opposed to the alleys that are there now that are gravel?
Sure. Yep, we can confirm the drainage areas and how much drainage actually comes to those alleys. We're likely going to drain that alley either to one side or we may end up looking at inverting that crown of the alley as well. But we're certainly going to be looking at the drainage of those alleys specifically here as we move into the design phase.
Well, when you say drain to one side, what do you mean by that?
Sheet drain from one side of the alley to the other side.
So one of the sides of the neighborhood gets the water.
Yep, in theory.
The
and
other
then
side
drained-
doesn't, depending on which way you decide
And then
to
drained either
tilt
north or
the alley.
south or east or west to the street.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a very good idea to me, but.
It's a way to direct the runoff down the street, so it's either a crown, or it's pitched one way, or it's inverted. So those are the options, because we want to direct the water when it gets to the end of the alley to either the east or the west.
Sure.
So we can get it in the storm structures that you were just talking about. The benefits of not having gravel, we have a lot of erosion of that gravel sediments, ends up in the storm sewer, clogs pipes, ends up in the creek. So we think it's a benefit from an environmental standpoint to just get the water to drain down, tie into the existing system. So it's
I
just,
agree with you. I think it's
it's
a
just
great
a way
idea, but
to
I
get-
just want to make sure that we manage the water well,
Yeah.
that
Good point.
it comes off out of the alleys.
Yep.
And if it's tilted one direction and it still gets it down the alley to a place where we can manage it,
Yep.
that's fine.
Yep, we don't want to put any more water in anybody else as it's going down the alleys. We want to get it to the systems we have available in the main streets, get it out of the
Yeah,
alleys.
okay, all right.
Thanks for
Thank you.
clarifying.
Those are all the questions I had. That prompt anything further for council members? This is a public hearing matter. I'm going to open it up for testimony from folks in the neighborhood that have a concern or a question for the Chowan Park A and B Neighborhood Roadway Reconstruction Project. The public hearing is now open. If you wish to testify, please come forward. Give us your name and address and express your concerns.
Warren Ajax. I'm at 5917 Beard.
Okay,
I have
Mr.
a
Jackson.
couple of questions and a couple of comments. Did I hear correctly that on the 15-year payout, it's 1% of the unpaid balance is the interest? Is that correct?
It's actually 1% over what our borrowing rate is.
But you didn't say what it was.
We don't know what that'll be until we go to borrow the money.
Okay, all right. The other question I have is the water main for each homeowner. Is the homeowner responsible from the house to the main, or is it just in the property line?
Okay, Director Mullin? Yeah, you could take his. I think it's an easy one to address.
So the city owns from the main and the street up to a little shut-off valve that's typically a few feet behind the existing curb and gutter. So we're going to replace that piece that we own.
Okay.
From behind that shut-off valve
Okay.
to your house is yours, and you can do as you wish with that piece.
Because I'm on the east side of Beard, I feel oppressed.
You don't look oppressed.
I feel oppressed. I'm old and oppressed.
We'll talk about it.
I'm completely unclear as to why the sidewalk and the parking has to be on the east side of Beard.
Okay, we'll
Is
address
that
that.
to help the west side of Beard?
Well, we'll talk about
And
that.
the other comment is,
Sure.
if there's a 5-foot sidewalk and a 5-foot buffer, it's going to take 11 to 12 feet off the property line. I don't see that as a benefit. I see that as a detriment.
Okay.
And the other comment I have is that the timeline on this project seems very optimistic to me, start to finish. Thank you.
All right, we'll get those questions answered.
I'm Lois Meerwald. I live at 5908 Beard Avenue South. So I have a petition, I don't know who I should give it to, of residents who oppose the addition of the sidewalk.
Sure, if you would hand that to the clerk, and then she'll make it part of the record. And I think that microphone cut out a little bit. Would you give us your full name and address again, please?
Yeah, Lois Meerwald, 5908 Beard Avenue. So a couple comments, you answered some of my questions, but the meetings you talked about earlier this year about the Pedestrian Facilities Commission, I believe it's called, and the meetings, I was not aware of any of them, and I will say for people I've talked to, we didn't know you were talking about proposing a sidewalk. So the first we heard was at the meeting in August. So I'm disappointed about that, and I think you could do better. Because 2 years ago, it wasn't part of it. The difference about our street, though, that I'm not sure you realized, you haven't maybe not been to our street, you know there's an alley. So that means the people across the street from me park in the street, which is their right to park in front of their homes. But when I'm going to back out of my driveway, their cars are in my way. I'm not looking forward to that, and I'm sure they're not either. I don't have a big car, but people with bigger cars have also expressed how difficult that will be. So that's one of the reasons I do not want the sidewalk. I also don't think it's necessary. I've lived there 35 years. I don't think the traffic is different than it's been in all those years. I have a child. She's an adult. There are many other children in the neighborhood. They all have survived without the sidewalk. So I would like to understand, what is your decision-making process where you add sidewalks? Because you're not adding sidewalks to all the other streets. It is not your plan to have a sidewalk on every street in Edina. So I would like you to answer, how do you decide where the sidewalk goes? And because there's one south of 60th, does that automatically force us to have one? That doesn't seem like a very good process.
All right, thank you.
My name is Ben Tozer, and I live at 5800 Ewing Avenue South. It's one of the corner lots identified as a .5 REU. First, a quick question. I'm not aware of what the current street width is that's now being narrowed down to 27 feet. So I'm not quite sure what the difference is going to be from before and to the after, and I'm curious to have that cleared up. Second, my comments relate to the special assessments that are being proposed and the procedure that's been used to generate them. As I'm sure the council is probably aware, a special assessment under Minnesota law can't exceed the special benefits to a given parcel. And that is a market value analysis, and it's a parcel-specific analysis. And that doesn't appear to me to be what has been done here, which appears to be a one-size-fits-all analysis. As far as that analysis goes, I understand there are some general benefits letters that were prepared by Nagel Appraising that were referenced earlier, but I haven't seen those. I'm not quite sure where I could get those. So if I could find out how the public can access those, I would appreciate that. The second part of that analysis relates to the day study, and I see my time is up.
No, that's just, you got a green light. You're still good.
Okay, all right, sorry, it looked right to me. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
The day study, which it says in the day study that exceptions, it might include small and modest homes, and that appears to me to possibly be my home. The Morningside neighborhood that's referenced was referenced earlier to generate the $10,000 to $15,000 that was appropriate for Chowan Park. The median value in the day home is $700,000. The current assessed value of my home is about half of that. In addition, the location of my home and possibly other corner lots, I wonder whether we really get half the value of another lot. I drive on Ewing Avenue maybe 3 times a year. I use 58th for everything else. My access to my home is off 58th. My windows predominantly look towards 58th. I can understand how there may be some additional value to my home from improvements on 58th, but I just don't see it from Ewing. So I'm not quite sure that the .5 REU really fairly captures that process. I'm hoping that since the final assessment is not until fall of 2020, that there's time for this council to adjust the assessment process it uses, even if they were to grant the request today. If so, then if there be further meetings with that, I'd like to be able to attend those. Thank you.
Thank you. Disclosure. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Carver, and I live at 5901 York Avenue South. We are one of the corner lots that borders 59th Street and York Avenue. Just a couple of questions and one comment. Number one, this feels like a project that we first heard about in the neighborhood probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I'm not sure when our streets were last, not redone, but maintained with just a fresh coat of asphalt. But for each of those years, if we had known this was going to be pushed back to 2019, we probably all would have been knocking on your door a decade ago saying it's time to put a fresh coat of pavement on. I think we kept hearing it's getting pushed back a year, 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, and next thing we know, here we are, and the roads were in pretty bad shape when we moved in 2001. So not for our benefit, but for the benefit of future neighborhoods, if these projects are getting deferred year after year, I would encourage looking at advancing maintenance work earlier in the process. If you think the project's going to potentially get kicked 2, 3, 4 years down, 5 years down the path. I would like to reiterate, or at least offer up my support for the repaving of the alleys. We do live on an alley. We don't access it because our driveway actually faces the street, so we gain no value from it. But the current gravel alleys drag gravel into the asphalt street, and they cause significant damage to the street, especially as the garbage trucks and recycling trucks pull through those alleys. They drag gravel out onto 59th Street, and it just eats up the asphalt on the primary street. I don't know if we have any neighbors here that have garages on the alley, but I'm sure drainage is a significant concern, as a lot of those garages literally face straight up to the alley. So if there's any concern about water actually draining into garages, that might be a concern to take note of. My only last question would be this, and that is, I'm curious as to why we're assessing the alleys as an additional assessment in addition to the streets. It's interesting to me because the parcels that the alleys sit on, in general, are very small. They're smaller than the rest of the neighborhood. And the reason that we have alleys with garages on the back is because of the smaller parcels. And so we're actually gaining less benefit, so to speak, in terms of the actual lineal footage on the street relative to other homes in the neighborhood. And so I'm curious as to why we're having an additional assessment rather than just wrapping that into the overall project cost. We don't assess people for additional lineal feet on the street. Why are we assessing for additional lineal feet on the back end in the alley? So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Sarah Schwiebert, and I live at 5909 Beard Avenue South, which is also the side that is designated for a sidewalk. And I just have a few comments. First of all, I did not know about that February meeting, and the first I heard of the sidewalk was at the August 13th meeting, when it sounded like it was a proposed change and not yet set up. And I also was under the impression that the reason the sidewalk was put in south of 60th Street was because it was initiated by some of the residents. So I'm just wondering if there is that kind of response to residential input, what happens like with the petition now? I mean, if this is voted on tonight, does the petition that was circulated have any impact at all? And then, yeah, I guess I think all the other questions were answered. But I do agree with what my neighbor said a few minutes ago. There really doesn't seem to be a great need for a sidewalk, as the main traffic seems to be construction vehicles and garbage trucks right now. And there also, then it would mean damage or loss of some mature trees, which would be depressing too. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Schrippert. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council members and staff. Thank you so much for having us and this opportunity. My name's Ruby Pajango. I live on 5933 Beard Avenue South. I'm a neighbor of Sarah and Lois's, and I reiterate and support and reaffirm all of the comments they made. I also did not realize in February that sidewalks were brought up, because I would have been there, but I'm here tonight since I realized that's what was happening. Lois brought up some really good points. The planning of the sidewalk, it seems very random. If you were putting sidewalks everywhere in that section, sure, I'd get it. But I know there are sidewalks south of us on Beard, but as Lois mentioned, that's a very different street. They have garages on that street. All of the houses, the majority of the houses, have their garages in the alley. And so there's going to be a lot more congestion of cars on our street, the 59th area. So I'm curious, what is the cost of the sidewalk out of the assessment? Certainly we like to save money, be fiscally responsible, The neighborhood, I've lived there since 99. I think no sidewalk has been fine. I do agree 59th and 60th Street definitely need sidewalks. That's a very busy artery. The buses go there. My children have stood in the street waiting for the bus. They go on the neighbor's property, which I feel bad for that, but it's unsafe on 60th and 59th. Also, I used to take the bus to downtown Minneapolis, and I decided not to walk to catch the bus, but rather drive my car from 59th Beard to park across the street on Xerxes, because walking that artery on 58th and 60th was just not great. So if you could save money by not putting a sidewalk on our street and use it to accelerate a sidewalk on 59th and 60th, I think that would be a better use. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate your work.
All right, thank you.
Hello, my name's John Doucette, 5845 Beard Avenue. This is more about kind of property value in a way. I have a 50-year-old silver maple. It provides significant shade for the corner lot at 59th. Not only that, but also one of the main reasons I bought the property 3 years ago. It will be torn down in the plan by putting a sidewalk in. It will change what that entire part of that neighborhood looks like. It's such a large and grand tree. My question is, what will if we go forward with the sidewalk, what is the plan to replace that tree or change that aesthetics in that corner for our neighborhood? Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Doucette. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Mary Kiley, 3308 West 60th Street. And I guess have a question. My house is located on 60th Street between Abbott and Zenith. And we have not only an alley behind our house, but one coming at us from 59th Street. And we're on the downhill side of that, so we're on the receiving end of a great deal of water. And while I am thrilled with the idea of having a paved alley, I'm equally as concerned about all of the water that will come from 59th, as well as the grade of the alley behind my house is already higher than my lot line. So I appreciate that you brought up that comment, and just want to say that I really think that needs to be looked at. I've met with the city engineers and done things to my house to try to improve it, but unless the city takes care of that, I am just not going to be successful in managing my water. So I appreciate anything you can do to make sure that happens.
Okay.
Thank you.
But you give us your address again, Ms. Kiley?
Yeah, it's 3308 West 60th Street.
3308, okay.
So we're in the middle between Abbott and Zenith, and on the receiving end of 59.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for all your work that you've done so far. My name is Laura Breifogel, and I live on 5836 Xerxes Avenue South. And I am here to comment on my support of the alleys being paved. My garage is in the back of my house, and it faces the gravel alley. And with the recent construction of the new big houses, there is a lot of tiling that has come from the north down towards my house. And in the spring, it's almost like a four-wheel drive. You almost need your truck in four-wheel drive to get up to your garage because the rutting from the drainage. And I face Xerxes Avenue. I do have a driveway in the front of my home, but as you can imagine, it's difficult to back out on Xerxes Avenue, so I try to avoid the front of my house. So I am here to comment on the support of paving the alleys in the proposed areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Breifogel. Anyone else? Good turnout. Okay, seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Second, a motion second to close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Okay, let's go back to some of these questions that folded along behind Mr. Jacks, he had a couple that we didn't get a chance to talk about. Now we've got models and
Multi-level streets, this is crazy.
See how this works here. We got a model to help
okay.
to show some of the questions that we had. So we thought we had the model, let's use it. So we get this question a lot about the street widths. Where's the sidewalks going to go? So this is the, it is the scale, by the way, with the cars. So this is a 30-foot street. One of the questions was, what's this existing street width? Most streets are 30-foot wide, with or without curbs. You can see the edge here. And the individual's walking down the street there on the side. So this is our existing street model. There you can see the underground utilities. Kind of hard to see. Water main, sanitary, storm sewer, where they fall. But what we're proposing for Beard Avenue is a 24-foot wide street. So one of the questions was, are you going to take all of my property? So we try to balance these needs between where the existing curb is here and kind of shift the road a little bit to make the impacts of the sidewalk with the curb equal on both sides of the street. So this is 24-foot wide, 5-foot boulevard, 5-foot sidewalk. So then the parking will be on one side, and you'll still have access for 2 cars going through that area after the fact. So we're trying to balance those needs on each side with the compared to the 30-foot width to the 24-foot width with the sidewalk and the boulevard. So I think
that's the same setup we have south of 60th?
That's the exact same street width and the same way we did it south of 60th.
All right, so one of the questions Mr. Jack said was, why are you proposing the sidewalk on the east side?
Yep, so we look at two, in this case we look...
I guess it's a two-part question. Why a sidewalk at all? It seems random. Several people had that comment. You're not doing it all over the neighborhood. You're not putting a sidewalk on every grid, every street, which looks like, to me it's a neighborhood where it looks like it could handle sidewalks everywhere, but nonetheless, why are you proposing a sidewalk on the east side, and why are we doing it on Beard, or proposing it on Beard?
Yeah, so in 2015 we had a bike ped master plan. Beard Avenue wasn't on that master plan at the time. We had the street project proposed for Strachauer neighborhood, and there was a petition or a lot of comments from the residents on Beard to have some access to the park, through the park, down the frontage road, and all the way over to France. So we included that facility. When we came back in 2017 to look at updating our pedestrian master plan, we saw the sidewalk here, and we know that we have a bridge over Minnehaha Creek on Beard Avenue. So we felt there's a nice connection going from that park all the way up Beard to cross over the creek. So in that process, we did mass press releases for the meetings. We didn't invite individual street with changes like this. Beard wasn't the only street that had additional sidewalks put on. I think as we learn where these connections should be made, connecting amenities, we added those onto the master plan. So there wasn't specific notice, as was discussed, inviting people to participate, but between making the connections from Strachauer Park up to this crossing of Minnehaha Creek, we see the benefit of continuing that sidewalk facility for catching the bus on 58th or 60th was one of the comments, or just for kids going up and down that street. So that's how it got included in the master plan in 2018.
Equidistant between Xerxes and
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
And then again, on the east side for consistency, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and the other thing Aaron just brought up was that it is right in the middle between Xerxes and
France.
France. So it's a middle spot of the neighborhood. So you're going to have sidewalks on those outside ones, but this is the middle street, so it makes sense to have one in the middle for that connectivity. East side was done on Beard, so that was one of the considerations. The other considerations are impacts as we go up. We could cross over at 60th and go up the west side, but when we counted impacts of trees, utilities, there's a huge fiber duct or a huge transmission communication duct on the west side that we'd have a very difficult time moving if we put the sidewalk there. So we looked at all the impacts, and the east side is still the better place to go up Beard between 58th and 60th.
So Mr. Doucette was also worried about the loss of a large silver maple, a large grand tree. He says it does some good work from a aesthetic standpoint, and also some shading work that it does, not only for his house, but his neighbors. So what do we do about a big, full, mature tree like that? We take it down, we go around it, what do we do?
Yeah, I think if I recall, those are silver maples. In the past, in other locations where there's nice big oak trees, things like that, we have adjusted the alignment to protect those trees. Typically, we consult the city forester too on type of trees, and should these be trees that we want to avoid. There's silver maples on both sides of the street at this location. Therefore, proposing to remove those. We are proposing, since those are large mature trees, I know it's not the same thing, but we're proposing 2 larger 8-inch trees replacement at those 2 properties.
Right, so you would propose taking them down?
Correct.
First, we try to avoid them. This case, we don't think we can. And if we have to take it down, then we would, like Aaron mentioned, we would give 2 trees back and work with that owner on where they would get placed behind that sidewalk.
And a few folks were wondering what happened in this process. Ms. Mearwold was talking about, we never heard about sidewalks, and all of a sudden, that topic never surfaced at, I think, the February meeting. And then all of a sudden it came to them after all the public input was over, and all of a sudden this sidewalk idea showed up. Is that because of the sequencing on the sidewalk plan, or what happened? How come that wasn't part of the discussion?
Yep, on the sequencing of the master plan. So we had met with this neighborhood in 2017, shared that it wasn't on the bike master plan because it wasn't at the time. The bike master plan was approved in February with this additional sidewalk based on what we've already talked about, those connections and the benefit there. That was just a broad notification to the whole city, you should participate in our master planning for this. Then we went back this summer and said it's now part of the bike ped master plan, and we're going to recommend it because of that plan. So there was no communication specifically with Beard Avenue residents that it was being considered to be added to the plan as part of the bike ped master plan.
Ma'am, public hearing is closed, so there won't be any more input.
So the February meeting, I think the referencing is when the staff brought the bike ped master plan to the public hearing and had it approved by council in February. And there was previous meetings before that, just citywide, with general notifications, but not specifically to Beard Avenue. Okay. So we probably could have done a better job of these. Maybe there's this one, there might still be a few others on that master plan that changed from the original master plan. That should have potentially been a consideration as we made those adjustments to that.
So that kind of begs the other question somebody asked, and that was, what is the decision-making process on sidewalks? How did you create this sidewalk plan?
Yeah, there was
kind of the question embedded in there, and how did we create this sidewalk plan?
Yep, staff feedback, mostly residents. We had open surveys. We went to Jerry's and had a booth there and got feedback. We did some other spots where we met people where they interact. We went to Centennial Lakes, we had an online website where people could submit comments on various elements where they think they would want bike lanes or sidewalks, and we had these maps of pinpoints geographically where people had commented, we need sidewalks here, 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 and then we compared that to surveys and feedback, and then developed the master plan based on all that information. And we tried to balance what we saw for these connections between parks or schools or other amenities we feel is important to connect in Edina.
Okay. Other questions on that topic by council members? Otherwise,
and just to supplement that, because I remember this pretty clearly, it was right after Councilmember Stewart and I were elected, but before we took office, that the pedestrian plan was adopted, I think, in December of 2014, somewhere in that neighborhood.
That might have been the original one.
Yeah, the original one. The original one was really a whole process with the Transportation Commission, and there was a lot of resident-led engagement. I just wanted to make sure people remembered that notion that, yes, it's been amended since then with some other outreach, but the original one was a very robust process and frankly, I remember articles in the Star Tribune and quadrant meetings, and there was a lot of focus and attention on the whole thing. I get that it wasn't this particular stretch, but the pedestrian plan in general was well thought out and a long process that led to it.
Correct. I'd say that process had a lot of people. ETC's been involved in both, so I didn't say that. And I would say the engagement we did with this recent one was pretty close to what we did the original one too. The petition you received, just to give you information, we counted 14 properties on the petition that Clerk Allison has received out of the 40 people that live on Beard. So just for your information, that's what we received here tonight.
Member Stewart.
Thank you. Yes, and to dovetail off what Member Staunton said, my memory was that the rationale was to create a grid through the whole city so people could walk or bike through the whole city. So, yeah, you have to connect things up in order to do that. But while we're on the topic of sidewalks, I believe, and I'm not sure I heard her name correctly, I believe it's Ms. Pajongo, asked what are the costs of the sidewalks within the assessment?
The costs are not assessed to the resident. This particular sidewalk, I believe it was $89,600 through the Pedestrian Cyclist Safety Fund or the PACS Fund.
Okay.
Which that cost was probably, if I had to guess,
Yeah, you might talk about
under
the
a couple
source.
percent over the whole project cost.
Talk about the source of funds there.
Correct. Pedestrian Cyclist Safety Fund, which is a franchise fee that everybody pays with their gas and electric service bills. You'll see it on there. We generate revenue to build sidewalks because we used to assess for sidewalks and we had a lot of concerns with getting them built in that case. And we saw the benefit to sidewalks from health benefits and the connectivity between various portions in town. So it's no longer assessed, but it's paid through utility bills.
All right, Member Brindle.
Couple things. Starting out regarding sidewalks, the sidewalk and bicycle plan prioritizes connections between certain points. So it's connections that lead to parks. It's connections that lead to schools. It's not an arbitrary set of paths one way and another. It's very specific around leading to a point, whether it's a park or a school or a library or something or a neighborhood node. And so there currently is a sidewalk south of 60th on Beard, and I would expect that sidewalk to continue north, possibly in the future, to get to Strachauer Park, or I guess Strachauer Park is to the south, but nonetheless, you've got Chowan Park on the north, you've got a variety of destinations. I am very passionate about non-motorized access to parks, to the point where I would somehow like to find a way to have a special zoning area around parks that we can lower speed limits, we can increase the number of crosswalks, we can make it safer in the area of a park. But we are getting there in small steps, which is how we do things, so that they're done right. And but the bicycle and pedestrian plan is really the overarching vision about how we are connected to one another and to our amenities. The other thing that I have is there's an email that came in from a resident, Preston Hines. He doesn't give his address. However, he lives on Chowan, at the corner of Chowan and 60th, and he's wondering at what point in the future will 60th Street be reconstructed? Because he'll get. It looks like he'll get a 50% or a 0.5, thank you, 0.5 REU, and at what point could that other 0.5 come?
So we do have some plans 10 years out. This one, 60th Street, is just starting to tickle that 10-year time frame. So it could be 10 to 12 years out
You know, I even hesitate to even say that because it's so far out in the plan, but that's roughly what we're seeing now with the pavement condition index and other variables.
Great.
So I'm going to go back to a couple other questions that were raised. Mr. Carver was wondering, gee, it seems like we've been having trouble over there with this, you know, the surface of the streets. It has been in relatively poor condition for a number of years. Been some deferred maintenance over there. Maybe you've been over there and done something, but you haven't done what could have been done to maybe give the pavement a little bit longer life. At least that's the way I was interpreting what he said. So what is, you might speak to what is our maintenance policy, and then we'll talk about, and then also follow that up with an answer to his question about why are we doing an additional assessment or proposed additional assessment on the alleyways as opposed to just including that in the overall assessment and having everybody help pay for alleys.
Yeah. So first off, I mean, these streets were constructed in the 50s and 60s, so no amount of maintenance eventually we're going to have to reconstruct. But we have lacked street maintenance in town, and we've come to the council and talked to you about that, and we've got a little budget increase the last few years to now do maintenance when we're supposed to do it. So our plan is when we reconstruct these streets is get them on a protocol of maintenance to get the life to be another 50 or 60 years and do that at prescribed times throughout the life cycle. So yes, I don't imagine a lot of maintenance was down here because we didn't have a prescriptive program. Our policy states that alleys are separate. We consider those separate from the street recon. We've done alleys in this general area of town and they've always just been a different assessment piece. So we're treating that as a different assessment piece. We could do it with or without the street recon. We feel it's a benefit to do it with the street recon right now because of the economies of scale that Aaron has talked about and hopefully get a cheaper number. Like we talked about in the previous ones, we'll go for bids and hopefully all these numbers come down once we see the numbers. But we think they should be done now and it is a separate assessment versus the street because we could do an alley on its own and the policy defines how that's handled. The only comment I would say is maybe checking with our city attorney, but I think it's a policy standpoint to assess alleys over 5 years. So I think there's an opportunity here if we do these two together. That number gets to be rather large at 12,000, whatever exactly the number, but maybe we can spread that out, the whole thing out over 15 years. Why do alleys at 5 years and then the street at 9 or 15? Let's do them all over 15. So I think that's an answer we can have when we have the final assessment hearing, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that.
There's no statutory reason we couldn't.
No, so I think we could as a policy standpoint if the council so, and then maybe the standalone alleys would still be on that 5-year window, and then we just have to make sure when we file it with the county that we're clear on those timeframes.
And I think the other point is one you made in one of the prior hearings, and that is that there has to be a direct benefit to the property being assessed. And if you're trying to include the assessment of the alleys in the broad assessment of 280 RUs to 300 plus properties, there's just no direct benefit there.
No, you have to be on the alleys to get the benefit that was shown in that general benefit letter. So there's one comment about very specific properties, and we've never done that. We've done the general benefit letter was a step further than we've done in the past. So we've had those conversations with our city attorney about the benefit. He works in a lot of different agencies, and the ranges that we've done over the last 6 years, he's always supported that he believes it meets that market benefit test.
All right, and then that kind of leads me to Mr. Kozer, who was asking a specific question about, well, gee, how do I know there's a direct benefit here that my property is increasing by the same amount you're assessing me? What's the connection in that special assessment policy, that requirement under state law? Why do we feel comfortable that we are getting the kind of, that residents are getting that corresponding value that a proposed $9,000 special assessment, for example, is going to manifest itself in a $9,000 increase in his property value?
Yep, and I would reference the two studies that, the day group one that we just updated, and then the general benefit question, and also the continued feedback we hear from our city attorney that it is justified based on what he's seeing in other agencies that he works for. The statute says that that we feel confident it meets the market benefit test.
And then I think I'm interpreting one of his questions correctly. I think he said, well, he's on a corner lot, I think it was 58th.
Yep.
And he uses 58th more than he uses Ewing. And so why am I getting a 0.5 assessment now and a 0.5 assessment later when really I spend most of my time using Ewing, or using 58?
Yep. And I would say there's still a benefit to having your street paved on both sides of your street versus gravel on one side and not paved on the other. Whether or not your driveway's on one side, you could ask the city and move those driveways, so we can't, that's a consideration we could do in the future. He could move his driveway. There's still going to be traffic generated from his property on Ewing as the garbage truck's there, the buses. So there's probably a little bit of difference between properties, but generally we support the corner lots as we assess them.
Yeah, and in fact, the corner lots have been better off, I think, since we went to an RU methodology where you get 0.5 when one side of your house is redone and then 0.5 when the other street is done on the other side of your house.
I do too, compared to linear footage where you'd be paying twice your neighbor because you have twice the footage, and so.
Okay, did I miss some questions there, colleagues?
The only question I saw was the interest rate question, so it's 1% above what we can borrow.
Right.
And it's
I think
typically
we answered
been
that.
between
Go
3 and
ahead.
4%.
4%?
3 to 4% over the last few years.
Yeah.
So whatever we borrow, it's 1% above that.
So we'll go out and do that borrowing, Manager Neal?
In June, roughly May, June, once we know of all the projects and we borrow the money, and then.
Folks like Mr. Jacks can check in with you to see what the interest rate was that
Yep.
we were able to borrow the money at.
Finance director will be back here with that bond issue
Jim.
through the city council.
Yeah.
Jim.
I think Mr. Scipione had a comment.
I believe there was a question about when those reports would be publicly available.
Correct. So the assessment reports, there was a comment. So NAGO was published, that report, or not NAGO, the day group one was published last week on the city council agenda. But the ones that are on the dais, we'll get those put onto our website with the project locations in the next week or so. People want it, they could email us and we can send them an email copy of that. So if they want to email us, we can get them to you. So that was just a report we were able to get done today in preparation for this meeting. So we apologize for not getting those done sooner.
Member Stewart.
Yeah, going on the list of questions, I believe Ms. Merwald asked, why is there parking on just one side, and she didn't like where it was?
Yeah, we typically, that's on a model here, we put the parking next to the sidewalk to provide a buffer for the pedestrians. And it also provides traffic calming, but on a 24-foot wide street, we can only have enough room for one-sided parking when we want to get vehicles and buses and garbage trucks through. So really with that width, what we're trying to do is not put in which we actually have another example, if we went to 27 feet wide, how much more space we would need on the ends if we went to 27 feet wide. We'd be much further out on each side here. So we're trying to balance how many impacts to the properties, but get what we're after. And we've done parking studies in this neighborhood and just don't see the need for parking on both sides of our streets. You're going to have an occasional get-together where you'll have more, but they can park there and use the sidewalk to get back to the property they're trying to get to.
And I know some of the folks I talk to from time to time south of 60th on Beard, now that they've had the street narrowed up, the sidewalk is really valuable to them. And a lot of folks have been using the sidewalk for doing their walking. So
yep, we've heard a lot of
benefit. On balance, it was a good way to go.
Yep, and a lot of the balance of traffic calming too. When you have a narrow street and parking like this, you get slower traffic going through because they got to be aware of the street widths. So it's also a double benefit, traffic calming and stormwater management. This is better too because we got less pavement in the end.
Member Stewart?
Yeah, there was also a question about, I guess more about process than anything else. Someone had asked Ms. Schweibert whether or not the petition that's submitted tonight has any impact, and I will try to answer that. I think public input of all forms does have an impact, and I think this council, and I'm soon to leave the council, so I can advocate. I think everybody on this council always takes very seriously all public inputs. It doesn't mean that we're going to agree with your viewpoint on every single decision. What it means is I think, respectfully listen to, read, accept that input, and consider it as we go through the calculation of these decisions. But I have to tell you, all of us lose a lot of sleep over these decisions because we know choices that we make do impact people's lives, and somebody is going to feel like they're a winner and somebody's going to feel like they're a loser. And so that's a hard thing. But yes, it is important for us to get that input, and we are grateful that you take the time to share your viewpoints with us. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
Thank you. That was good catch. Other questions? Member Brindle, you saw one that was
Mr. Carver asked a question. I don't know if he's still here or not, but pardon me?
He's not, but go ahead.
But he asked about this project and how it is that it came up and then was delayed, and then it came up and then it was delayed. How is it, what happens in the schedule when a project is scheduled and then changed?
Yep, we try to lock in 3 years out. Our maps published on the website are 5 years out. In this case, we think this one was delayed 1 or 2 years when we just looked at mailings and stuff, so it wasn't as long as what was talked about. The reason this one was moved is because of that water main project in Birchcrest, where we had to delay that, do a lot more water main work. That one was already in the queue for this year. We had to do all that water main work because we found rusty bolts. This one's got a lot of water main work, so we had to make sure we had enough money to pay for this water main work in this neighborhood. So it got moved because of another infrastructure issue that came up. We don't like to move things around, but it happens when we open up some of these projects, we find unknowns.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Other inquiries of staff or comments? Otherwise, we have a resolution 2018-132, which accepts the engineering study and approves the Chowan Park A and B neighborhood roadway reconstruction project, and authorized plans and specs to be completed and bids taken. Could entertain a motion and then second, and then have some further discussion. Is there a motion to adopt that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion second to adopt resolution 2018-132. Further discussion.
Well, we do have a petition, which we didn't receive until tonight, and that, I will stick my neck out and say that's not ideal for us to receive a petition on the evening that we're going to make a decision. It's best that that a petition would be received in advance of that decision so that we have that information coming into tonight. So I guess our choice would be to whether to delay this decision till the final council meeting in December. I wouldn't want to push it any further because we're doing this at this time of year because the bidding environment is best this time of year. Everybody's setting up their projects for the coming year, and we want to be out of the gate early with the request for bids. So I really don't want to delay this vote, but I'm sorry, but it's tough when we get information at the last minute that we're unable to consider.
Director Milner, do you want to comment on Member Brindle's inquiry?
Yeah, I think exactly what I heard. I think we could keep this project moving forward. You could vote on the assessments tonight in the rest of the project, and we could start working on it and get going. And then if you wanted more time, you could vote on the sidewalk portion next week at the city council meeting on the 18th. It's 1 week from today, if you needed time to consider the petition. When we counted, it was 14 properties out of 40 along Beard. So we would love to keep the project moving forward. If you wanted that extra week, you do have an extra week and still could get it approved in December, just on the sidewalk piece. Another thing with sidewalks is it doesn't need a 4-1 vote. It's not, accessible items need 4-1. You can consider sidewalks at a 3-2 vote if there's a concern with, if you wanted to vote differently on those particular elements of a project.
Okay.
So I'll just throw that information out for the council to consider.
All right.
Member Fisher.
Well, I would just say, it may not be ideal, but I think we get the gravity, right? There's a petition that says a bunch of people don't want the sidewalk either on their side or on the street. I don't think it would change how I would vote in this case because, we know from experience that there are places in a city where people don't want the sidewalk because, it's a pain. It's a pain to shovel it. It's a pain to have it there sometimes. But I think this is the example of the greater good. And at the end of the day, the reason we have a citywide sidewalk plan is because we have to think about the greater good. And I spent quite a bit of time during the discussion, just looking at the map and thinking about this street in conjunction with other streets. And frankly, what surprises me is that it wasn't in the original sidewalk plan, because it really makes so much sense. I mean, you got a park on the south, and if you keep going, there's a park on the north, and it's where the bridge is across the creek, and it's exactly midpoint between the two. It's exactly where you would put a sidewalk. And it's a bummer if it happens to be on your side of the street and, it's your tree. I mean, that stinks. But sometimes you just can't avoid those things. And in the big picture, I think we have to, do what's best for the whole community.
Okay.
Other thoughts on the sidewalk issue? All right. I'm comfortable voting on the sidewalk issue tonight. I think our council has been really good about maintaining the public input with respect to the sidewalk plan. It's been good about maintaining the notion that we need to create this system over time. I voted against the sidewalk segment early on, or I think it was over in Birchcrest B, because it seemed like a sidewalk to nowhere. But I realized in subsequent special assessment hearings that really it was providing the first element of connectivity. And then we had that happen over on Valley View near the ball fields, and we found out that people over there were saying the same thing. Well, this is a sidewalk to nowhere in Member Brindle's neighborhood. And now I have people telling me they use it all the time to walk their dog because it's the safest thing they can do. And I saw that same thing over on Beard, south of 60th. So the petition wouldn't cause me to change my opinion in terms of the common sort of benefit here for the people in our town. And I would support the entire project, including the sidewalk.
But we should note that the plan, even when it was adopted, I think the expectation was that it would take 40 to 50 years to fill out the sidewalk grid that was being planned. And when that happens, there are going to be segments that will be unconnected until the next segment gets built. So we cannot do it all at once.
Thank you. Others? Okay. We've got a resolution in front of us, 2018-132. Dealing with the Chowan Park A and B neighborhood roadway reconstruction improvement embodied in BA 451 and A 279. We've got a motion and a second to adopt the resolution, and we have had discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And the final public hearing matter tonight with respect to a proposed roadway reconstruction improvement is Todd Park E neighborhood.
Here.
And Mr. Scipione, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Oh, thanks. Just bear with me for a second here. I apologize. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. So I have the pleasure of closing out tonight with presenting the Todd Park E Neighborhood Roadway Reconstruction Project. This project involves reconstructing the last gravel street left in town. There are still a handful of gravel alleys, not including the ones in the Chowan Park AB project, but this is the last gravel road in town. There are 7 properties adjacent to this project area. The project area includes Brookside Terrace, north and south of 44th Street, as well as a section of Motor Street. It's about 0.1 miles of road altogether, 827 square yards of street pavement proposed, 1 existing hydrant and 3 existing sanitary manholes. The water main in the neighborhood consists of ductile iron and copper pipes. The copper pipe is 1.5 inch, which is undersized compared to today's city standards. The ductile iron pipe in the project area has been reviewed through our non-invasive pipe assessment condition program and has been determined to be in adequate condition. The fire hydrant that you see pictured there is original to the neighborhood. It's not currently up to city standards, doesn't have that stores nozzle for quick connections, and the gate valves in the neighborhood are nearing the end of their useful life. So for the proposed water main improvements, we're proposing to replace all the gate valves and upgrade the hydrant in the neighborhood to the city standard with that stores connection, as with all the projects. The undersized copper main in the neighborhood, we're proposing to replace that with a 6-inch ductile iron pipe and replace the associated water services. In addition, we're going to verify the appropriate hydrant spacing and add hydrants into the neighborhood if required to meet public safety standards. On the sanitary sewer side, the sanitary sewer in this neighborhood consists of clay and reinforced concrete pipes. In fair condition, our Public Works has televised all the pipes in the neighborhood. We have determined that there is inflow and infiltration currently occurring in the system in this neighborhood. This image is not from a pipe within the neighborhood, but it just gives you an example of some of the defects that we typically see in our sanitary sewer pipe. We have seen in this neighborhood some localized sanitary sewer defects. In addition to those inflow and infiltration issues, and some of those include root intrusion and incrustation. So the proposed improvements for the sanitary sewer, we're proposing to put cured in place liners on all of our sanitary sewer to reduce that inflow and infiltration, as with all of our other projects. In addition, replacing the manhole castings and rings, again, to reduce that I&I component. The storm sewer in the neighborhood is corrugated metal and reinforced concrete pipes. There's relatively few inlets in this neighborhood. There are localized surface drainage issues that we've seen and have been verified from resident comments. The image on the right, I apologize. The image on the left shows Motor Street, some localized flooding on Motor Street, and the image on the right shows the northern section of the project area where it abuts West 44th Street, and it shows how some of that gravel kind of washes out onto that asphalt surface. Both of these areas are gravel surfaces that discharge directly into Minnehaha Creek, which is just to the east of this project area. Recent aerial photography as well as site inspections have confirmed that there is a significant amount of sediment accumulation in the creek directly adjacent to the outlet pipe for this neighborhood. So for our proposed improvements for this storm sewer, we're proposing to install all new curb and gutter. It'll be a combination of bulkhead and surmountable curb and gutter, which I'll get into a little bit further in my presentation. In addition, there'll be modifications to the roadway and the storm sewer network to improve existing drainage issues. Sump drain pipe will be installed where feasible to allow homeowners to connect their downspouts or sump discharges into. In addition, we're planning to remove that sediment from Minnehaha Creek. We've already engaged conversations with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, and they are supportive of those improvements. And we will work with them to apply for whatever permitting is necessary for that work. The existing roadway conditions, the streets were originally constructed between 1910 and 1930. We don't have a really good idea because they're gravel streets. The neighborhood was one of the original areas in town. It was platted in about 1906, I believe. They're gravel surfaces with no curb and gutter. The existing street widths vary from 12 feet wide to 35 feet wide. And it's about a foot of gravel throughout the project area based on our soil borings with the substandard base material, again, verified by those soil borings. Within the right-of-way, as with all of our projects, we have trees, vegetation. In this area, we have some boulder and timber walls. The boulder wall is pictured there on Brookside Terrace, as well as irrigation systems and pet fences. Some of those items may be impacted by our proposed construction, and if they are impacted, we'll do our best to repair them to pre-construction conditions. For our roadway improvements, we're planning to recycle the existing gravel where feasible. Otherwise, we're going to be importing additional gravel material to construct an adequate base layer for the new road. Subgrade corrections will be performed as necessary, as with all of our projects. and then 2.5 inches and 1.5 inches of bituminous wear, or base and wear respectively, will be installed on both of these streets. So the Living Streets plan, these streets are currently designated as local streets per the Living Streets plan, and that designation comes with a recommended width of 27 feet. There are several unique factors with these streets, including the fact that the right-of-way is narrower than what we typically see. 60-foot right-of-way is pretty typical for Edina streets. In these areas, it varies between 40 and 50 feet. There's unique property impacts, including some of the trees, landscaping, some of those walls. There's limited vehicle traffic given the context of the neighborhood. The northern section is a dead end, and the south section feeds somewhere between 10 and 14 properties. And the existing character of this neighborhood is unique compared to other areas in town that already have pavement for one and already have curb and gutter. So combined with those factors combined, in addition to feedback that we've obtained from the residents, we're proposing narrower street widths than what's recommended in the Living Streets plan. Specifically, I'll talk about, we've kind of divided the project area into two sections, the north section and the south section. I'll talk about the north section first. This includes Brookside Terrace, north of West 44th Street. In this area, we're proposing to construct the roadway at a width of 15 feet with surmountable curb, as opposed to our standard bulkhead style curb. And that 15-foot width is measured from the back of the surmountable curb to the back of the surmountable curb. So that 15 feet is basically the driving width that's available for the road. In addition, we're proposing about a 32-foot cul-de-sac at the end. Both the proposed street width and the cul-de-sac are consistent with existing conditions. And the 15-foot width, we've had that reviewed by Edina Fire Department, and they are comfortable with that because it's very similar to what's there right now. In addition to the the curb and gutter installation, we're proposing one-sided parking on the east side of the street. On the south side, Brookside Terrace between 44th and Motor Street, we're proposing a 20-foot width, and that's measured from the back of the surmountable curb to the face of the bulkhead curb. So that bulkhead curb we're only proposing basically along the west side of the project area adjacent to the railroad property. The remainder of this whole southern section will be the surmountable curb. Motor Street is also proposed to be 20 feet, and that's measured from back to back of the surmountable curb. So again, both of them are proposed to be 20-foot widths. One-sided parking on both sides. On Brookside Terrace, it'll be on the east side, and on Motor Street, it'll be on the north side. At the southern end of Brookside Terrace, we're proposing to install a concrete driveway apron. That'll basically be the entrance to the gravel alley that extends to the south. That apron will serve a couple purposes. One, it'll allow us to kind of contain the rest of the gravel that we're not proposing to pave over. It'll also allow us to better control the drainage coming off of that gravel alley. And our goal is to be able to collect that in a sump storm sewer structure that can be vacuumed out and maintained on a regular basis before that gravel washes out into the creek in the future.
So if you go back to that picture.
Yes.
So where it says Brookside Terrace gravel at the bottom of the picture, which is to the south, that's going to continue to be gravel then?
Correct.
And is that a city street that will continue to be gravel?
Well, I don't know if it's technically a street. I'll let Director Milner answer that question.
So if you notice the note on his graphic, 27-foot roadway easement, when you get just past this screenshot, that whole gravel road is on railroad property where we don't have rights. So we do not want to be in there doing any work because we don't have rights to do it. The rights we have are located basically right to the front faces of all the garages. So if they didn't like that location of the gravel alley, they could tell us to move it to the appropriate location and we would directly affect the people that live there. So we're just going to continue to maintain the gravel where it is and not do an improvement because we can't assess the railroad property and we don't want to go and do a project that's not on where we don't have rights.
I wondered, and I'm glad I asked because, okay, thank you.
So this picture here was taken just last week, actually. We're at the intersection of Motor Street and Brookside Terrace, looking to the north. And this is just kind of an example of basically this is what our proposed parking restrictions would involve. Parking on the east side of Brookside Terrace and parking on the north side of Motor Street. And then this is also a picture showing the end of Motor Street right now, where the gravel just kind of ends and transitions into turf. It's showing how we currently maintain this road as far as snow plowing. There's kind of a wooden post way out there that they plow to, and throughout this process, that turf is annually torn up, basically, and it's constantly needing to be reseeded and repaired. So it's kind of an ongoing maintenance expense that, in our opinion, really doesn't need to be happening. And we hope to remedy by having pavement for one and having curb and gutter as well. So the project costs, the roadway costs amount to about $58,000. The utility costs, sanitary sewer, $56,000. Water main, $98,000. Storm sewer costs for this project are about $140,000. That includes a concrete curb and gutter. And in addition to that, similar to what we did with the 54th Street project last year, the other gravel road we had in town, we felt, given the context of this neighborhood, that it was, and given the water quality benefit, we felt that it was appropriate to incorporate some of those roadway costs into the storm sewer fund for this project. So that's what these costs reflect. So the total utility cost for the project is $294,000 for a total project cost of about $350,000. And those costs include engineering, clerical, and finance costs, as well as contingency. Assessments are proposed to be levied against benefiting properties, as with the rest of our projects. There are 7 properties adjacent to in this project area for a total of 5 RUs. 2 of these properties are corner lots on 44th Street, and 1 property, 5107 54th Street, currently does not have any access to Motor Street. Motor Street terminates approximately 75 feet to the west of their property line, and we're not planning to extend Motor Street out to their property line. So we felt comfortable that that property would not receive a benefit from this project, so they're not proposed to be assessed.
Where is their driveway?
Their driveway is off of 44th Street.
Oh, it is off of 44th. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
So total roadway cost of $58,500 divided by our 5 REUs gives us a proposed assessment of $11,700. Excuse me. The assessment payment options is same as with all the other projects. Final assessment will be levied in the fall of 2020. There are a few different payment options. The entire amount can be paid to avoid future interest charges. Homeowners can pay a minimum of 25%. The remainder rolls over onto property taxes for 15 years. The entire amount can be rolled over to property taxes for 15 years, or residents can apply to have the assessment deferred if they're 65 years of age or older and meet certain income requirements. The project schedule is similar to the rest of those that have been presented tonight. We had 2 open houses for this project area in 16 and 17. One unique item for this project is that project workshop on August 2nd. Given the unique nature of this project and the relatively small amount of residents that would be impacted, we felt it was it was necessary to go a step beyond our normal process. So we invited those residents to a workshop at our Public Works facility to talk through the project process and to kind of get their input on what they wanted to see incorporated or not incorporated with the project. In addition to that, they were also invited to the informational meeting a couple weeks later. ETC reviewed our engineering study in October. Council received the petition or our report last week, which brings us to the public hearing today. Bid opening is proposed. If the project's approved, bid opening will occur in March and April of next year. Similar to what was mentioned with the Indian Hills C project, given the relatively small size of this project, we're proposing to combine it in a contract with the Chowan Park A and B project. again, to obtain those economics of scale and try to minimize the construction costs. Construction is proposed to begin in spring of 2019 with completion in the fall of 2019, and then that final assessment hearing will be in the fall of 2020. So at this time, staff believes that this project is feasible, cost-effective, and necessary to improve the public infrastructure. And at this time, we recommend approval of Resolution 2018-133, authorizing the Todd Park E neighborhood roadway reconstruction.
Any questions for Mr. Scipione at this point in time? Member Stewart.
Thank you. So the dirt road that I pointed out earlier that is the railroads, I guess, there are a couple of houses down there that are Edina residents who can only be reached via that dirt road. Is that not right?
That's correct.
So it seems to me that there's still, for some time in the future, an issue that we need to wrestle with there to make sure that our residents are connected to our city, and I guess trespassing on the railroad easement or railroad property, I don't know how it is. But it seems to me there's an unresolved issue there, and I just want to make note of that.
I will say that early on in this project, initially we had that southern section of Brookside Terrace included with the scope of this project, but we subsequently received a significant amount of feedback from residents on that section that really did not want conditions to change. And that was kind of when we started to dive deeper and discover the extent of the easements and where the alley was actually located. And
I know that's true. They kind of like their little dirt road. I'm glad it's being bundled with the Chowan project again, because I think otherwise you've got 5 REUs here. So the people who are part of this group could be experiencing sort of an unfair lack of economy of scale because of just being 5. I hope that doesn't burden the overall Chowan contract when we get that done. But one of the things that occurs to me is as people, as we improve these roads, it seems to me that everybody who's along the road should participate in the cost of it. And there's one big property owner here who is not sharing in the cost of it, and it's the railroad. And it seems to me that they should probably have to participate in this. But there are no residences there, so it doesn't seem like it's fully balanced, and it feels to me like 10 grand for each of these houses is probably a bit higher than what it ought to be for these 5 REUs. Just my thought. I'm looking at a fairness thing.
Well, I can say we've never had discussions with the railroad about assessments, but I'm pretty sure the answer we would get is no. So I think noted that there may be, but I don't think it would get very far.
Yeah, why don't you give Bob their number?
Yeah, I'd like to hear the discussion.
In all seriousness, I mean, we have our special assessment policies in the state for cities are pretty broad. We can assess churches, other levels of government, schools, et cetera. But we are very limited when it comes to any kind of regulatory authority of any kind with railroads.
The railroad barons of 100 years ago did a very good job of lobbying the federal government to preempt any state and local regulation.
And that's where we are.
Yeah.
I would like to note, though, that earlier I made a kind of whispered that don't poke the bear. And Bob basically wants to punch him in the face. So just wanted to note that.
Hey, goodbye. No, what I'm more worried about is not that I think we can actually get money from the railroad, but are we asking too much of the residents? And is there some way that we should make some accommodations so that we don't overly burden these 5 REUs? Again, it's for me, I just have a discomfort. It feels uncomfortable to me that we're go ahead, Chad.
Well, I think it goes back to the benefit letters that you have in front of you. The benefit to these properties were analyzed by this firm, Nagel Appraising, and they say this is well within the range of assessments for these properties. So that's my fallback to say that it is meeting the benefit question for them. And it's in line with the other ones that we've heard tonight. So that's where I'd fall back on.
Right.
I would also, Councilmember Stewart, I would mention again that some of those costs that are normally allocated to the roadway costs and are specially assessed for this project, we have allocated to the storm sewer utility fund because of the water quality benefit of paving the street and performing those improvements. So that's had the effect also of reducing their assessment compared to what it could have been.
Right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, well, let's have a public hearing in this matter. Let's open up the proposed assessment regarding Todd Park E neighborhood for public testimony. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council on a matter of concern to them?
You have as much time as you want.
Oh, man, feels good to stand. Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Janelle Vick, and I am located at 5120 West 44th Street. First of all, I want to say thank you. My husband Andrew has had many questions and has emailed and called and talked, so thank you so much for answering all of our questions and being extremely accommodating. To speak to some of the things that he mentioned too, we feel like we have really been heard from the standpoint of the uniqueness of the road there, and there's only 3 of us on the north side there of Brookside Terrace. You know, our address is officially, we face 44th Street, but we really value, we wanted to make sure that no trees were going to be taken down because there was the possibility of we could go as wide as 24 feet, and we felt very comfortable with having a narrower road. We've been used to that. We've had the property, my husband bought it in 2003, so 15 years. And so we really have enjoyed the uniqueness of the area, but also we understand too that our neighbors, and we respect our neighbors as well, and a lot of them have been there longer than we have too, and they really do love the old gravel road, and it has been there for over 100 years. And so that's been one of those challenges that we've kind of just tried to navigate through, because when we look at it, we don't feel as strongly against, paving the road, and we see the benefits of, we see the city, having to call and request to fix the potholes and all those things, and just minimizing that effort and seeing how the gravel goes into the road, like we see that all the time. So we also have 2 small boys, 5 and 1.5, so we see the advantages of having a paved road for them and plan to be in this home for the rest of our lives. So, and let's see what else I wanted to say. There were so many, I had so much time to write so many notes down. So I just want to make sure I say everything. So we feel like the benefits outweigh as well. We did a major renovation a few years ago as well. And we do honor and preserve like the history of the neighborhood, and we didn't tear down our home and just build a new home. We kept all of the main walls and have all original windows, and kept the infrastructure of our home and added next to it. So we value the history of where we are too. So just wanted to point that out. But we feel like this would be a lot of what we would want and bring a lot of value to our property, and it impacts us a lot. And we have dust that comes up on our windows from the gravel road. We hear the gravel road. We are the ones that see the most traffic because we're that corner lot. So the 2 homes behind us don't get as much traffic or drive by, and they don't hear the noise or get the dust or anything. So we know that all of that would change if we had an actual road there. And we feel like we added those boulders as part of the landscaping too. So we feel like that makes it look even more like a private drive, and I think will really look really nice as people drive by and add value. So that's all I wanted to say. Good. Thanks for letting me go a minute over.
Can I ask you a quick question?
You sure can.
So is there a bittersweet element to this, that I mean, like when you give people directions
Yeah.
to a place, to your house in Edina,
Yep.
you get to eventually say, and then take a right on the gravel road.
Yeah, my
Right?
husband prides himself in that's been one of his things. He's a storyteller, and so he just loves to say it's the last gravel street in Edina. So that has been a line that he has said many times. So that would change, but we know that change is good, and if it doesn't happen now, it's going to happen 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and so we're happy to be a part of that.
Just save a jar of the gravel before they take
Right.
it and recycle it into the
Right.
new road, right?
Yeah, no, seriously. Yeah, thank you. Right, I know. Well, I'm riding the bikes and just, yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
So, any other questions for me?
Just say hi to Andrew.
Yes.
I will. I know.
Please
I was
do.
going to say, I said some of you might know my husband. So.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah?
absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I wish he could be here. He's working, so.
I see him at quite a few weddings, it seems like, as he's there taking photos.
Yeah, he's working right now.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Ms. Vick. All right, anybody else? All right, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Got a motion second to close the public hearing regarding the Todd Park E project. Any further discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We've got a resolution, 2018-133, which accepts the engineering study, approves the neighborhood reconstruction project, and embodied in BA 454, and authorizes plans and specs to be completed and bids to be taken. Is there a
So
motion to
moved.
adopt?
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2018-133. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right.
It's great to meet
Scipione,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Can I,
Member Stoughton?
I just had two things that I wanted to follow up on. One was Chad and Aaron and Andrew. I just wanted to thank you for your work. I think, one of our strategic objectives is to have an engaged and inclusive community. And we are constantly working on this community engagement business. And frankly, I don't think there's anybody in this city who does it better than you do, and are also at the same time willing to continue to try and refine it and get better at it and recognize we don't always do it perfectly. But I think we heard a number of people who came up tonight and said, thank you for, Chad, you're walking around in people's, just every corner of the community. When people call, you say, yeah, I'll come out and talk to you and look at your place and figure out what's going on. And so I just want to say how much I appreciate the effort that you put into that. And I know that it's 2 or 3 years
Ditto.
worth for every project. So, and then the second thing I wanted to talk about is we have had this ongoing conversation about turf restoration. And I'm wondering if there might be a way when you go to the bids to do an alternate anyway that has a single turf restoration piece to it. Director Milner?
Yeah, Councilmember Stoughton, we were ready for your question tonight, and we didn't hear it all
I'm
night.
a one-note Johnny on this.
We were waiting for it. We're going to do one contract. We think we can do it. Again, it's one of those, if we don't try it, we won't know. So let's try it. Worst case, we go back to what we're doing. So our plan is to develop a one contractor to do the seeding for all these projects here tonight. See how it
Give it a
goes.
try.
If it doesn't go better, we go back to the other way. So.
And I know you guys are constantly working on reinventing it
Yep.
with the way we've been doing it. This is just one more thing to try.
Yep, exactly. So we are going to do that.
I appreciate it.
So I have a question.
Member Brindle.
Thank you. So in the Indian Hills or Indian Trails BNC project, we're not changing the width of Paiute Drive, Paiute Pass, Paiute Circle, thank you, and Sally Lane. So we're not changing the width of those streets. We're doing spot repairs on curb and gutter. So for those of us who have gardens right out to the curb, do we need to do anything if you're not going to change the width of the street, or should we move our plantings out of the way during construction so that afterward they can be moved back?
I would have, if it's you or other neighbors, contact us. We'll come out and look and tell you whether we think it's going to be replaced or not because of curb condition. Is it next to a hydrant? Is it next to some other improvements, water service, or something like that? So
Okay.
it's not going to be a blanket answer. It's going to be really
Okay.
property
Fair enough.
specific, and we'll have an inspector out there and we can meet with whoever and have those discussions. I'd say once the snow melts, so we can, if you do need to move it, we can give you plenty of time to do that.
Great, thank you.
Anything else, folks? Councilmember Staunton, thank you for those comments regarding our terrific engineering department, folks. So thanks for a good night of work here. If there's nothing further, we will stand adjourned.